Sorry, had myself on mute there, Stephen Poacher. Hello and welcome to our game on this Monday morning here. Loads has happened over the weekend. We're going to have Fintan O'Toole and Fitzpatrick on chatting to us later on. But I suppose before we get into any of the results, and so much has happened, what's going on in terms of like the players' expenses at the moment? And we saw Tom Parsons last night on the Sunday game, Stephen, and he's basically talking about the arrears that players, like, I mean, I don't think anyone who's any interest in sort of GA and players and what have you would have any issue with the players getting their expenses brought up to date. I think that absolutely should be done as quickly as possible. You know that there was a surplus for the GPA last year or the GA after the two previous years of the GA very much struggling and been down an awful lot of money. But in terms of the conversation where it's at, like, should this talk be about ensuring that it's all about expenses going to players, or should part of this conversation be about ensuring that, well, maybe meeting up 3 times a week or 4 times a week if you include a match is enough? Where do you stand on all of this, Stephen? Because you've been involved with Carlow, you've been involved at Roscommon, you're involved at club level, you see what it's like.
Yeah, look, players make a huge commitment, Shane. I think probably there's a wee bit of both. You know, how many nights do you actually need to meet up? And I know the situation's actually funny. Carlow and Roscommon, my own experience, like their situations were quite similar in that they had a lot of players based in Dublin, Shane. So they would have had to make the journey down to Carlow, you know, twice a week. Now, Turlock was very good in that, you know, he sort of wanted them to do remote sort of S&C sessions in Dublin when they can. But we would have had them down on a Tuesday, Thursday, and then obviously the weekend as well. Anthony was very, very similar in Roscommon, you know, the S&C side of things, you know, trusting the players, the Dublin-based players to do their own stuff, like a huge amount of players coming across from Dublin. Like I did the journey for a year, obviously, and you know, it's a long track for a player to travel over, get out of the car, train hard, get back in the car, and maybe get back to Dublin 12 o'clock that night, you know, and it's a huge commitment. And the other thing we've got to consider too, Shane, like, for example, there just even last year, like there's, like, even take Big Enda, for example, Big Enda Smith, Big Enda was studying to be a teacher, you know, so he's still at university, so he's not in a full-time employment. You know, obviously money wouldn't just be growing on trees for these lads, like, you know, and it was the same in Carlow as well. We had a lot of students in UCD and DCU down in UCC as well, and you know, they're traveling back. It's a massive commitment for a student, like huge amount of money. Like, and I have a student teacher in my own school myself at the minute, like on placement on Mondays and Tuesdays, like, and you know yourself the struggles that they have. We've all been students, we've all been there, you know, and it is and inter-county football now, lads, to be honest with you, is littered with young lads like students, you know, and it's become nearly a young man's game. Like, there's very, very few players now playing well into their 30s, as we know, because of the commitment level. So it's a wee bit of both. You know, there's massive, you know, massive asks on players now from management teams. I find it, Shane, I think less is more. I've always said that. I think less is more. And like, you know, you look now at what the Joneses are doing. Everybody's looking at what the Joneses are. They're training 6 nights a week. We need to train 7. You know, they're training twice a day. We need to train 3 times a day. You know, and it's all this. And again, it comes down to probably the group of players you have. Like, can you trust the players? And if you can't trust the players to do their own S&C, to do their own little bit of conditioning away from the group sessions, because your time is limited. When you have the group together, for me, your time with the group should be focused on the footballing matters. You know, it shouldn't be focused on the conditioning matters. I always say that club players, even, you know, come back to pre-season, you know, fit to play football. Don't come back trying to get fit to play football. You know, come back fit to play the football, and that takes a bit of individual responsibility from the players too to do that. But listen, I think what COVID has taught us certainly is that Zooms are now a big part of things, so we can do video analysis on Zooms. We would have done an awful lot of that with the Rossi lads. Like, you know, we would have had a lot of Zoom calls on a Tuesday night with video work, and players were presented. No, it's not the same. It's not personal, and you know, you don't have the same sort of, you know, buzz or whatever when you're meeting as a group and things like that. But you know, it probably has taught us that, you know, we don't need to be together 6-7 times a week, you know, and I think some of the demands placed on players, Shane, is quite scary. Like, but I did chuckle last night with a hint of irony, like when I heard Colin O'Rourke giving out about it, like, and you've got to remember too as well that there's people making a large amount of coin sitting in those studios on the back of these amateur players, you know. So we've got to be sort of thinking of that as well in that respect. Like, so look, it's a debate that's going to rage on, of course. Like, but listen, the other thing, Shane, I said to the wife the other day, like, I said, geez, I'm glad I'm not traveling down the country now. £2 for a litre of diesel or whatever it is, like, you know. So like, it's gonna, I think it's gonna have implications for a lot of people, you know.
Yeah, I think you've definitely got a very strong point on that. I'll give a bit more background. I suppose obviously the expenses were lowered a nice bit during COVID there, which the players absolutely accepted. And the charters the players' charters to be sorted at the moment. And there was talk of 50 cents per mile, and then after talks broke down, it seems the GA, the talk is that they're talking about 65 cents per mile for 4 collective gatherings per week, 3 training sessions at a game, with anything beyond that to be subject to local bargaining. Now, one of the big things that Tom Parsons was saying, head of the GPA, is that players don't want to pay to play, which I think pretty much everyone would agree with. They do a huge service, and obviously there's the flip side whereby they get the enjoyment of it, the health benefits, stuff that Colin O'Rourke was saying too. So obviously he had a couple of valid points at the same time, but I can understand where you're coming from at the same time. But he did say that the GPA is looking for, it's basically talking about unlimited expenses. And is this a move towards semi-professionalism? And even look at the amount of money that the top brass in the GPA made in 2019, collectively 450,000 for the key personnel, as it was called. And overall, 10 full-time staff in 2019 earning 742,000 euros. So there's that in as well. And also, like the ESRI report a few years ago talked about players spending up to 31 hours per week. So, Fintan, in light of all of that, should the talk be just about all expenses should be covered no matter how many training sessions are done, or should they be banding together and trying to find ways to limit the amount of sessions, or certainly the amount of sessions where you have to travel across the country? Because, like, surely you'll do 1 or 2 gym sessions at the year where players need to be shown certain techniques and all that kind of stuff, which I get. But after that, surely do your sessions, at your own leisure. And also, like any meetings we'll do over Zoom, so there's no expenses for that.
Yeah, I'm probably coming down on the side of the cap on the sessions and as regards to the travel. I think they're the kind of main issues that have been kind of thrown into focus by this. If you look at the schedule the way it is now, let's say like there was a round of football league games this weekend, there's a round next weekend of football in Ireland, there's football in Ireland the following week, league final the start of April, then we have only 1 week break between then and championship. So, I mean, you'd wonder how many training sessions are teams actually going to be fitting in. I mean, given how hectic the schedule is going to be, is it kind of not a more kind of a recovery base at this stage? And I mean, I suppose the debate is kind of between the GPA and the GPA, or it's been framed as that, but ultimately a lot of it I would think was going to come down to, in terms of the capping, it's county boards enforcing it and it's managers. And I think it's quite a difficult situation for players, especially this time of year. A lot of kind of young guys, I suppose, are kind of getting games in leagues, guys trying to break into squads. If a manager tells them to train 5 times a week, very difficult for them to say no if you're trying to make your way and try and get a place on an established squad, because let's face it, they'll probably find, top counties will probably find some guys who will be able to do that and kind of will be willing to do that. So I think that's one of the kind of difficulties. And there is like Stephen alluded to, like there is the person next door syndrome about it, like as in, okay, we're a Division 2 or Division 3 county, how are we going to get better? It's like, well, we got to be 6 days a week, it's just the natural way. We've seen that kind of through with the GA. So I think it should be capped, to be honest, but trying to enforce that, I think, would be very, very difficult. I mean, you go back to the GA's efforts to try and get the training ban, for example, that no county will go back between certain dates. And we all know anecdotal evidence over the last decade whether that's been kind of flouted. Even like 12 months ago in COVID times, that was obviously a big thing with kind of teams training. So I know that's maybe a separate kind of a thing that has kind of sparked this, but it is obviously linked to it. And I mean, like the cap of the training sessions, I didn't really interpret it the way O'Rourke did, that they're looking for unlimited training sessions. The way I was interpreting it was basically, if players have been asked to train 6 times a week, they should be covered for that. They're not looking, that was the way I was reading it anyway. They're not looking to be training 6 times a week at this time of year. But obviously, in some cases, there is, for various reasons, demands for them to be done it. But like the point Stephen makes in terms of the travel, is very, very relevant at the moment. Like, I mean, it's more and more like with the cost of it and with the guy and the fact that we're going back to now, I think most third level institutions that it's gone back to actually being on campus education. So it's not like, for a good bit of during COVID when guys were doing lectures at home and were able to, maybe had moved back to their home counties and it wasn't as much of a trip for training and all that. But I mean, I think we're definitely getting into that situation now where, different parts of Dublin, Cork, Limerick, Galway, guys have big commutes kind of coming back for training sessions, so it's a big issue. And where it goes from here, I mean, if it starts impacting on game schedules, I mean, that's one thing the GA don't want, because one consequence of this change in the season, they don't have much time to play around with. So like if they were to lose, not say it's going to happen, but if they were to lose some games out this weekend, it's hard to know where they're going to be able to fit them in.
Yeah,
Shane, on that, Shane, if I could just make a point there, Fintan says there, you talk about the travel, I obviously was in a privileged position having employment, and you were coaching. So like you got your expenses. We all know that coaches, managers, you get your expenses. Physios get their expenses. Everybody, players should be no different. Okay, but I was fortunate because, say, for example, you mightn't have got your expenses for 5 or 6 weeks from a county board because county boards are historically slow at removing funds, and you could have been out, honestly, the guts of close to £1,000. Travel, just on travel and expenses and maybe food and things like that as well on the journey. So you're lucky enough if you're in employment that you can afford that. The money is going to be replaced with your expenses. But if you're a student, lads, like that is a very, very difficult thing a very difficult fight to fill. And I know historically from days of Carlo, like Daniel St. Ledger was the GPA rep in the county and did a lot of work for GPA and stuff. And Daniel would have put huge pressure on the Carlo County Board because there would have been times when players weren't paid for weeks and weeks and weeks, and lads were starting to feel the pinch, man, and what Fintan said there is completely true. Like now, above more than ever, with the price and the cost of fuel, it's unless we're going to supply them all with electric cars, I don't know what the way forward is.
Yeah. Well, look, I was just looking at plenty of tweets last night, and as ever, this topic exercised a lot of people, and some people talking about, saying that Tom Parsons is saying that, players should get paid for 5 to 6 training sessions per week, and obviously that is the expenses. And look, that's what we're talking about here. I see Brian Flannery, former Waterford hurler, saying nonsense from GPA. If the intercounty players are so united, why can't they just agree that no panel of players will participate in more than 4 collective sessions per week? Simple, really. A question I'd have for you then, Stephen, is how many times a week does a team need to meet collectively, realistically? I mean, surely 3 collective sessions and maybe plus a game. 3 to 4 is enough. Everything else, it can be done in solo.
Yeah, you see, the problem you have too, Shane, is that you're accommodating all these management teams now that have got so big. Backroom teams are bigger than playing teams in some respects. You've got your S&C men; they want their stage. You've got your nutritionists, you've got your coaches, your forwards coach and your goalkeeping coaches, and you have all these different types of coaches, your video analysis and your stats man, and they all, it's nearly as a manager, you're nearly managing 2 teams. You're nearly managing a backroom team and a playing staff. So, but I do feel, lads, less is more. I really do, and I do feel that things can be beneficial. Like, for example, I don't know why a lot more counties don't do it. Like, so for example, there, like, I know a county here close to myself here, like, that would have been using bank holiday weekends locally to do like nearly, little mini training camps, but it would be done at home. It wouldn't be going away down the country or something like that. Then, teams can do a lot more of that, and they can pack a lot in. Because I know our time, like when we would have went to Johnson House pre-COVID, we would have stayed for one night, but we got so much work done Saturday, so much work done Saturday evening. The boys might have had a couple of beers on the Saturday evening as well from a cohesion point of view. Then Sunday we worked hard again, and then we're away home after our dinner on Sunday. And you're away for a couple of days, whatever. But the work that you got done in those two days was monumental. It was worth 2 to 3 weeks training, Shane. But this is the point I make, and this is where I think a lot of counties are losing the run of it. When you have the players collectively, the time should be spent coaching. The time should be spent coaching. It's as simple as that. We're spending too much time worrying about conditioning levels and S&C coaches and the likes of that. Start coaching your teams, and I can see it. And watched a lot of football over the last few weeks, and you can see the teams at the highest level. Yes, they're physically conditioned and fantastic condition, but they're really, really well coached. And there's a lot of really good work being done on the training ground. I think sometimes your Division 3, Division 4, you can make massive gains with good coaching. As simple as that. Good coaching can make massive gains in those divisions. And you can see management teams that are well organised. The likes of Enda McGinley there in Antrim, you can see the job he's doing. Like, I don't think Antrim are any fitter than Laois or Westmeath or Limerick or London or any of these teams, but they're well organised and they're well drilled, and they've got a plan. They've got a management team who are setting them up in the right way. They're playing football. They've got a direction. They've got a clear plan, a clear focus. And I think sometimes we lose traction of what is actually most fundamentally important, and that is coaching the team how to play the game. And that's like.
Is 3 sessions enough per week plus a game? I mean, should really the focus be on making sure that this doesn't happen? And obviously, I would say the best way to do this is through the GPA, where there's a system for players to anonymously report with the GPA or whoever that our county board, our manager is trying to make us do 5 sessions per week here, and we're not going to get paid the expenses for it. That might be the way to clamp down.
I don't know what do you need? What do you do in 5 sessions a week? Like, what do you do? It's madness. Like, it really is madness. Like, and it's got the stage. And I said this, Shane, in your show before last year. I felt that I was involved in it. Like, I think the intercounty game started to become a runaway train, and you're sort of looking at it, going to yourself, like, where does it end? Like, where does this end? Like, It just, is it going to be 7 days a week, full commitment? Players aren't allowed to associate with their club mates. They're not allowed to do anything outside of the county. You've got counties on their nights off. Players have been forced to do Pilates sessions. That's happening here, and you're just going to yourself, give the lads a couple of nights off, because at the end of the day, less is definitely more. And like, if you're meeting 2 nights a week, like, Shane, we had a great year with the Carlo lads, a great year in 2018, and we actually did very, very little. Like, we would have met Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and the best year in 100 years. Like, it's like, it wasn't more training 5-6 days a week, and they were in good shape. Mature group of players you trusted to do their S&C work. Lads in Dublin do their gym session, logging in with the S&C coach, whatever it happens to be, job done. He's got to remember these players have lives too. Like, and it just can't be completely absorbed and consumed with 5 or 6 days of absolute, regiment that you need to be there, because there has to be a breaking point somewhere, So yeah, the cap on the sessions maybe isn't a bad idea, But listen, the other thing too, and you look at it, like the legacy that some management teams are leaving as well. As regards injuries, like, there's one county there in the last couple of years, I think there was 12 hip operations or something like that. Now, don't quote me, I'm only throwing that as a throwaway comment, but there was something I read somewhere where, the volume of training these lads were doing, there was an obscure amount of surgeries that were needed when the management team walked away,
Yeah, Ace Ollie 180 says 3 sessions is more than enough to be training. Coleman Long says it's 2022, not 1970. Everything and everyone must evolve. Bodybuilding won't make you better. What about club player who doesn't get a brass end? Well, there are clubs out there who actually do more commitment than certain inter-county teams, maybe at the very, very lower end of the scale. Probably not in football, but maybe more so in hurling. There are some kind of inter-county hurling teams that are probably operating at pretty low level, and they are getting grants. And when people say, club players are putting in the commitment, there are a certain amount of club players who are putting in the commitment of inter-county players to some degree. Fintan, over the weekend, you were in Tralee, and Jack O'Connor did speak to the media, but a number of the inter-county managers withdrew with media cooperation and solidarity. James Horan, Fergal Logan, Brian Dooher, Desi Farrell, Glenn Ryan, Kieran McGeeney, Declan Bonner. So it was just Jack O'Connor and Seamus McEnany who spoke to the media. Do you see, like, there's...
Poor Joyce was another one. I know, did you see his quote? He said he never had much time for it. I'm not sure of the phrasing, but he said it was something that never had concerned him. So he spoke after the Clare game, right? Which was interesting.
So do you see, like, there's talk of a bit of an escalation here? Do you see an escalation happening? Do you see, like, in terms of, like, obviously the GPA would love everyone to be aligned on this issue, but do you see a sense of some people will cooperate and others won't, a bit like back when Cork and Kilkenny, the socks up and the shirts out back in the day?
Yeah, well, I think there's definitely a sense of a split there, Annie, already with what we've seen at the weekend, I was in Tralee, as you said, like, we spoke to Jack O'Connor afterwards. He was asked about the fact that James Moore, and he said the first I heard about it was just coming up the stairs there from the Kerry PRO. I mean, the word had filtered through to us just before the game, about half an hour before throw-in. But from his point of view, he was out on the pitch at that stage, the team were warming up, so I presume it wasn't something he was aware of. But I don't think you're going to get widespread solidarity across the board that every manager is going to kind of adhere to this. As regards the effect it has, ultimately, from a media point of view, in terms of kind of, print online, I don't really think there's a major impact. I suppose it is the broadcast partners that have actually done deals, like RT obviously would have wanted to have James Horan on the sideline. TG Carey yesterday had 3 games, they wanted to have the man of the match interviews afterwards and the managerial interviews. So maybe that's the impact, and maybe that's what we're going to kind of hear over the next couple of weeks. But as regards escalation, I mean, I suppose there is it hasn't been said concrete at the moment, but I've seen a kind of report, or hasn't been stated in a concrete fashion, but it has been kind of hinted at, the possibility of, I suppose, games not taking place, and that's the big escalation. I mean, that's where you really start getting the impact. We're now in a situation, crowds are back at games where people weren't anymore. There's huge interest there at the moment. The Football League in particular, I think over the next couple of weeks is really going to consume people's attentions, because there's so much at stake, and it's really going to shape the seasons. And the fact that you've only a couple of weeks then between the league and the championship, I think there's a great kind of a buzz there, and it kind of naturally feeds into each other. But if you're looking forward to those games and suddenly those games are gone, then that's when if there is a couple of games gone, I mean, that's the kind of nightmare scenario for the GA that they really don't want to avoid for several reasons. But probably this year to be surprised if it comes to that. But it definitely, from kind of maybe a slow burning issue on Thursday or Friday, it kind of caught fire a bit over the weekend, didn't it? In terms of kind of in the spotlight, and obviously it's kind of the main thing that, like, we're talking about now after the weekend's action,
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to speed read through a thread from journalist Kevin Egan. I think he's touched on a lot of good points here. And I might throw it to you finally then, Stephen, before we move on, maybe talk a little bit about both of your counties, Down and Cork. But Kevin Egan goes, if there's an agreement to pay player expenses at a certain rate, it should get paid. Arrears are not acceptable under any circumstances. 2, if players are asked to go to collective sessions at a specific location, mileage should be paid. If you're only going to pay for 3 sessions, then players should not be asked to do more than 3 sessions. 4, however, some reasonable amount of pooling cars is a fair request. The point is the players should not be out of pocket. It should not be an income stream. Number 5, players need to be aware that the GA don't pay players' expenses. County boards do, and county boards draw their income largely from within their own counties and from GA members in that county. This money does not come from TV rights or corporate sponsors. 6, training sessions cost very different amounts in different counties. The mileage payment needed to assemble the Donegal, Roscommon or Leitrim senior football panel is very different to the mileage needed to assemble Dublin or Kildare. The GA does not centralise this cost. 7, for obvious socio-economic reasons, there is a negative correlation between the wealth of a county and the cost of running training sessions in that county. So if there's an arms race in terms of the volume of collective training, then some counties cannot compete. 8, this is why the GA needs to take this opportunity to hammer down on excessive training, make it clear that more than 3 collective meets a week are not allowed, and put hard punishment in place for verifiable breaches. This is a real chance to reinforce amateur status. Number 9, an ethos of faster, higher, stronger does not improve the entertainment value of our games. It only serves to make it more elitist, to freeze out more professions, to burn more resources to no good end. There will never be a better chance to push back against that ideology. And number 10, agree a deal with the GPA that confirms how expenses must be paid in a timely manner, that no county will ask players to travel more than 3 times a week, and then make that deal public. GA members deserve this, and if it's fair, GPA won't mind the public seeing the details. Any thoughts on the back of that, Stephen, before we finish up? Anything else we haven't said?
There's a lot of info to take in there, but no, listen, look, I think I read something, Shane, a couple of years ago. Leitrim were talking. There was a RTE were doing a sort of a fly on the wall thing over at Leitrim Centre of Excellence, and I think the average cost of an inter-county training session, one training session, was something like €3,500. Is that right? Is that correct?
I've heard that sort of figure before. Yeah.
So if you're thinking of that, that's 10k a week, man. That's 10k a week to run a 3 nights a week training, for an inter-county team, and over the course of 30 weeks, that's 300 grand. It's a lot of money, huge amount of money. So, it is. Look, it's something that the debate will run on and it'll roll on. And what Fintan there is rightly said as well. I would hope that it doesn't get to the stage where we're losing games, because the football is getting so exciting right now, and there's just so much at stake in every division, both top and bottom.
Yeah, so a couple of comments coming in here. Philip O'Brien, just look at how far the game has come on the last 10 years, solely down to hard work and training. If you want to win, you'll work harder than everyone else. Papa says football is unwatchable at this point, boring with not a lot of actual football, gone more like basketball. I'm sure not everyone agrees with that. We'll move on from that debate and talk about both of your counties, Down and Cork. It's 12 years ago that the two teams were playing in an All-Ireland final, and this time next year, it could be a case that neither of them are actually even competing for the Sam Maguire title. So Offaly beat Down in Park Esler over the weekend. I think they scored something like the last 4 points of the game, was it, Stephen? Something like that. And Cork were beaten by 8 points away to Meath. So both the two teams are at the bottom of Division 2 at the moment, not looking particularly pretty. I'll start off with you, Fintan. It was on TV as well, Cork's defeat to Meath. I have to say, it wasn't very inspiring stuff. And now that Sean Meehan is likely to be out for the season, it's more bad news for Keith Ricken.
Yeah, no, it was a pretty disappointing game from Cork's point of view. Like you touched on the Meehan thing there, that it was kind of surfacing last week about the extent of the injury. Then it's turned out that he's gone on for surgery in London today. That's on the back of Sean Poacher having had a hamstring injury as well. I'd argue they're probably Cork's 2 best defenders. In the kind of destruction they suffered against Kerry last summer, one of the only really bright point was the performance being put in on David Clifford that day, holding him scoreless from play. And that was kind of reflected in the fact that he got made joint captain this year, and it's kind of a sign that, here's a 21, 22-year-old that's kind of going to take ownership of this team, and you can kind of build a side around the centre back. Now he's gone for the year. Not a huge amount of kind of obvious replacements in terms of kind of filling those offensive positions. They've had a glut of injury problems. I think Down are probably kind of similar as far as I know in terms of club commitments and injuries. So there is kind of similarities between the two counties in that sense. I've quoted this stat to you before, but I thought it kind of showed up yesterday. They've given 13 debuts, senior county debuts in the first 2 rounds of this year's league. And I think that just shows in terms of the way they have to go, these guys, in terms of conditioning and being exposed to this sort of level. I thought Meath swallowed them up at times yesterday. kind of swarm tackling. And once they kind of got a scent of it, Meath, like they were against the wind in the first half, but you kind of wouldn't really have known it the way they kind of took control of the game in the second quarter. Look, new management, and I accept that it takes a bit of time, and I would always be for giving a new management team a couple of years, I think, to kind of put your stamp on it. And there's a lot of different kind of factors that are difficult to kind of hit the ground running. But I suppose you kind of want to see signs of progress. And like, only scored 110, only scored 1-4 from the 20th minute on. So in the last game, they got 2-17 against Galway. But some of the scoring totals, it's hard to kind of detect what the kind of attacking strategy is. I mean, they only scored 7 points away against Derry as well. I know that was a difficult game with conditions and all that, but like that game was live on TG Carr as well. And it was just difficult to kind of see kind of much kind of cause for optimism. And this was the start of the kinder schedule. You would have thought this was the start of where they, they played the 3 high-flying promotion sides in the first few games. So you're like, okay, can kind of push on now. But look, I think from the outset, I generally would have thought this was going to be a very, very difficult campaign for Cork, just with the personnel changes over the winter. Some very good guys for different reasons aren't available. And I always thought it was going to be a struggle to kind of maintain Division 2 status. But I would have always thought as well that this game next Sunday, Cork against Down, was going to be a big one for both sides. Thought both of them might have picked up a point between now and then. I was just watching the Down Offaly highlights last night. In fairness, Barry O'Hagan was quite unlucky, I think, with that last free. But it's just like the margins are so tight for these teams down at the bottom. And just what that means for Offaly now, I think, regardless of what happens to them next weekend, they'll be at home against Cork in the last game, and it'll kind of be in their hands in terms of to get something out of it. But definitely for Cork, given the implications for Tailteann Cup and the fact that they're in the same side of the draw against Kerry, there's a huge gulf at the moment.
Yeah, Stephen, Offaly have come a long way in the last while, but your own county Down, I mean, obviously this is a disastrous defeat really, and the form is not good. After the game, the Offaly players were fist pumping, they were obviously delighted. And John Mahan said, the Offaly manager, we were hoping to get a break somewhere along the line. We're thrilled to bits. There was a manliness about the performance, a never say die attitude. The conviction was there. The winning mentality were there. So that's from his side. I mean, your own thoughts then on Down. How did they play? Is this a game they should be losing?
Look, myself and Benny went to the game colder, and the two of us were standing watching it. It was startling to see how it was unfolding, but you could nearly just predict what was going to happen, Shane. The longer the game went on and the more Offaly hung in, you could just sense it. You could just sense a nervousness about Down's play. One of the problems we have straight away is a goalkeeper. We've used 4 goalkeepers this year. Okay, 3 in the 5 National League games, which is a phenomenal statistic. I don't think there's any other county that's used 3 goalkeepers in 5 games. Bobo Kane was in, did reasonably well. Kilcoo goalkeeper. He's confident. He's assured. His kicking wasn't bad. But our biggest problem, Shane, is that we're a team of individuals. There doesn't seem to be any cohesion in our play. There's no joined up thinking up front. It's just individual moments of brilliance. Fintan mentioned Barry O'Hagan. You have to admire Barry's attitude on Saturday, and his willingness to try and drive the thing on and go at the team and, run at them and kick some great scores in the first half. And then in the second half came out and had been moved back to wing back, which was astonishing because he was probably our biggest scoring threat and we were playing with a gale in the second half. We dropped off every single Offaly kick out in the second half, which, like, home to Offaly is just... It's hard to actually believe that we did that, So there's a lot of things there tactically on Saturday night that I was so disappointed with. Like Conor Laverty went in last week and took senior training all week. So we felt maybe, and I think by all accounts, he ruffled a few feathers when he was in there. So I think I was hoping that maybe the influence of Laverty's sessions might have given the thing a bit of a bounce and a bit of a lift, but it just didn't seem to be there, Shane. It just didn't seem to be there. And I don't know if the players are thinking, like, James was thrown in there obviously at the last minute, and maybe the players are just minding the jersey for, a period of time until they feel that there's maybe more of a permanent, manager in place or whatever for a bit of longevity. Maybe they don't see James being there a long time. So I don't know. It's hard to know. But I don't think the problems are just Saturday night, Shane. And I won't accept listening to people in the crowd saying this is the level we're at. It shouldn't be the level we're at. It shouldn't be, we're going to Division 3, that's the level we're at, but it's not the level we're at. Down have good players, good club players, Kilcoo are All-Ireland club champions, so, like, it's not Down club football is very, very healthy. I've been involved in it for 12 years now. I watch Down club football, very, very closely. I've been involved in it very closely. Down have very, very good footballers, but what we need is steering and direction from the bottom up. And I think, we talked there about 7-8 years ago, doing an old branch review and rebranding the development squads and more academies and all this nonsense and tick box. Look, talking is cheap, and it's time to walk the walk. And we need a really, really vibrant young people coming through there. They're going to drive things on, behind the scenes, whether that be coaching, administration, whatever. But we do need something, because if we don't, it's just gonna continue to get worse. And the Downs problems are deeper rooted, Shane, than just getting beat by Offaly on Saturday night. There's huge issues within the county. I don't know what the story is. There doesn't seem to be any apathy to the county board. The clubs are not very united, and when it comes to the county setup, club players would rather stay with their club than go to play for Down, and that's a big problem. That's a big problem, and having the fact that we've used over 80 players in the last 5 seasons is absolutely frightening. It's frightening. You look at the Women's panel and Armagh's panel, and again, topic Kieran McGeeney, like we've said this before in the show, I don't think that Armagh club football is as strong as Down club football. I genuinely mean that. It's not, but he has got a group of players who are dedicated, who want to play for Armagh. He's got rid of the show ponies, he's got rid of the bluffers, and he's got himself men who are willing to put their shoulder to the wheel for the good of the county, but there's longevity with them. They've been there 6 or 7 years on an S&C programme. I would say Down are probably on their 4th or 5th S&C coach at this stage in the last 5 or 6 years. Do you know what I mean? No cohesion. There's no cohesion. It's always what we're always looking for, Shane, and Down. We're always looking for the quick fix. And that's a major issue. That's a major issue. And if you don't look for longevity, then you're going to get the quick fix. You might get it as a one-off bounce, but over the long-term process, you're just going to fall further and further into the abyss. And listen, if we go to 3, which we will do, we will go to 3. I don't know what Fintan, I don't know how bad Cork are. I haven't really seen much of this year, but it's astonishing what's going on in a county of that size as well. But if we go next week and lose to Cork, we're in Division 3, and I'll tell you this now, it's just not a matter of, Division 3 will be back, will be okay. Division 3 will be tough too. It'll be tough too. You'll have Cavan probably coming up alongside maybe Tipperary or whatever. Who knows who's going to come out of 4. You'll have a couple of teams dropping in 2. The teams in 3 will all fancy their chances as well. It's, there's no guarantee you get out of 3, and it happened to Armagh, and they stayed there for a long time, and it was a serious rebuilding job. And I think McGeeney probably doesn't get the credit he deserves for what he's done with Armagh, and I'm envious of them. They're better rivals, and you look across the border, living in Newry here, half the city is Armagh, half the city's Down, and it's hard to listen to Armagh fans right now. They're laughing and snarling at you, and and it's depressing, to be honest. But you have to admire them. You have to hold your hands up and say, look, what they've done is they've put a high performance environment in. They've got a brilliant management team. Marty Clark told me on Sunday morning after doing commentary in the Monaghan game that he felt that, in the Kildare game, he felt Armagh one of the best coached teams in the country, and he's probably right. They're very, very well drilled and well coached, and they're maximising their resources, something that we aren't doing, unfortunately.
I know you're a little bit pressed for time, Stephen. Do you have to head away there now, or do you have another minute or two?
Yeah, I'm a bit of pressure, Shane. Yeah, I'm gonna have to pop off.
Okay. Well, look, brilliant to have you on, Stephen, and we'll touch base with you again soon.
Good stuff, right, Fintan? Have a good one, lads. Take care.
Cheers, Stephen.
Okay, well, that was Stephen Poacher there. So
just to touch on Shane, actually, just a couple of things. He's kind of gone for us there, but I find it amazing the similar issues that they're having in both counties. He talked about the goalkeeping issue. That has been one for Cork over the last couple of years in terms of trying to get a proper kick-out strategy. As you guys kind of sticking with their clubs, this is probably the first season that I think there's been signs of that in Cork, that for a lot of times there was guys were going in. There didn't seem an issue for the last couple of years, but it seems like a lot of guys have kind of had it done over the last couple of years. Maybe have had long club seasons and just kind of weren't able to kind of commit to it. And the other one, I think this stat is kind of fascinating, to be honest, personally. Anyway, if I was to ask you to guess, since the start of 2017, how many players Cork have used in league and championship? What would you reckon?
Oh, God almighty. I'd say there's a massive turnover. Actually, and just even to frame that point, the Tipperary footballers, of the 26 players who togged out against Cork, in that Munster final in 2020, 14 of them are no longer there. So I'd say you're probably looking at, I'm going to guess it's somewhere up around 75.
It was 93, and it reached 93 yesterday since the start of 2017. So I just looked into this last week because I was kind of struck with the turnover. So this is 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, and then the first 4 games of this year. Now, the volume of this year has been huge in terms of the guys. So basically, it was at 91 last week, and then actually Brian Hayes yesterday would have made a senior debut for Cork, and Kieran Histon would have had a kind of brief appearance around 15, 16, but in the 17 to 22 period, he started yesterday. So it's 93 players have had a game. You've had 15 new guys this year alone on the back of those 2 guys yesterday. So I've kind of just find it interesting listening to Stephen there, just the different points he touches on. You're looking at opposite ends of the country, different kind of football cultures and all that, but they're so similar in terms of, like he's saying, trying to build cohesion with that kind of turnover. And look, you can't really pin that completely at the new management's door, and there's different reasons for different guys being out. I accept that in terms of injuries, retirement. Like the injury situation is kind of hard to get your head around, really, in terms of, like, is it bad luck? You know, the way some guys have been struck down. Like, for example, like Cork won the Munster under 20 last year. I know it's a different underage grade and all that, but would have been viewed as, like, you know, a couple of very, very promising guys. But like the best forward in that team, Conor Corbett, he did his cruciate in last year's Munster final against Tipperary. So he's been out. Diarmuid Phelan was a young defender who played in the McGrath Cup this year. They were hoping to maybe have a look at him. He did his cruciate playing for UCC and the Sigerson. You know, just interesting the way that these things happen. But in terms of trying to build a settled side and kind of get that identity going, I thought in the second half yesterday, it was just kind of falling apart in terms of, and you could see the kind of deep-rooted issues that are there.
Yeah, and you saying that 93 players in how many seasons? 5, was it? Since
the start of 2017. So this will be the 6th season that have played league or championship for Cork. So not all of them have started. There was a caveat that a couple of those guys, they might have made 1 or 2 sub appearances. But that quote that Stephen said, I think it might have been Carol Kane or someone I saw shared it, that Down had used over 80 in the last 5 years. And I was just doing a piece last week. I was like, geez, you know, Cork can't be far off that. And then when I looked into it, it's a fair old number when you look at it that way.
It's a nuts amount of players. And straight away I was thinking of other counties there where players might be in there for 5 or 6 years before they truly get a run of games where they're starting in championship. And a player that came to mind was Cormac Costello, because, you know, think back to, was it 2016 or 17? I sometimes mix up those Mayo Dublin games where he came on and made such a crucial impact, scoring 3 points in that big final. Like, he's 27 now, and he's probably more of a guaranteed starter in the last year or so, but he made his debut all the way back in 2013 against Westmeath. So when you contrast that with what you're talking about in terms of the likes of Cork, the likes of Down, and then actually the goalkeeper topic that you've both mentioned for Down and Cork. Sure, like me, that actually had a very good goalkeeper yesterday, popping over points from all different. Is it Barry Hogan? I know it was Hogan.
Harry Hogan, but yeah, like it's taken them a while to get one. Like that you're probably going to
go through about 9 goalkeepers during Andy McEntee's reign.
It's 11, I think, is the stat,
now?
And he has kind of become the settled one. But yeah, like that's like they have had that. You know, they can understand that kind of sense of uncertainty over that position, and like it's become so pivotal. Like you just see it in so many different counties, just the way that the game has gone. But yesterday he was able to basically get a lot of very, very good short kickouts to the D. Cork weren't able to kind of figure that out in the first half against the wind. He was also able to go long. They had Brian Menton back in the team. He was like really, really good. I think he makes a big difference around the middle, so they were able to kind of get a grip on the long kickouts. And then obviously the points he kicked from frees, he kicked, I think it was 5, and all of them in the first half. Really, really kind of nice kicking style, the way he came up. I know there's a traditional view that, like, you know, there should be an outfield capable of doing this, but personally I think, you know, I've seen Robbie Henley as well in Saturday night in Tree. I think if a guy is able to do it, doesn't matter where he plays on the field, as long as he's at your disposal, you can call on him to kind of score the shots like that. But yeah, it looks like that's been a long an issue for them, but it does look like one that's been solved. And it's just interesting the way it's kind of turned very, very quickly for them now. You know, I mean, probably could be looking to get something out of the Clare game this weekend, given Clare don't have anything to play for in terms of their promotion prospects are gone. So you'd imagine they're probably going to be safe going into the last day. But from Cork and Down's point of view, like Sunday is just absolutely massive for both of them. If any hope heading into the last day.
Absolutely. Just a reminder, we're brought to you by OurGame. If you want to get any of the jerseys on screen there, maybe even the one that I'm wearing here, this little sweet Down number, go to OurGame and use the promo code OurGame. By the way, if you want to get Thursday's show, that's going to be Patreon only. So patreon.com/OurGame, just a $5 a month, which works out about 50 cents a podcast over the course of the year, which I'm sure you'll agree isn't that much. There's a load of different games we have to touch on before we get Paul Fitzpatrick from the Anglo Celt on to talk about all different matters in football. But a couple of games to touch on. Roscommon drew 12 points apiece with Derry in Division 2. Roscommon were up 11 points to 5, and Derry scored 7 in a row before Roscommon equalised. Now, Shane McGuigan, you know, there was obviously that he was already on one card, and then Brian Stack held him around midfield, and you could see him. He was trying to more or less let Stack just pull him around the place, not to do too much, but they both ended up getting carded. which meant that Shane McGuigan got red carded, couldn't take that late free to try and win the game for his county. That was missed, ended up being a draw. I haven't seen an outburst or a reaction like that from a player in quite some time. He was absolutely incandescent. And it reminded me, like, we won't have half the fallout from this as we had when David Clifford got red carded for, remember that second yellow he got against, or was it a straight red against Tyrone there a couple of years ago in a league game? And, you know, the talk of protection of forwards. But this was a similar enough scenario.
It's the exact same situation. Like, it's like one of the best forwards in the game, really, I think, over the last, you know, the way people have seen the last 12 months. Like, you know, just the work he done with Shock Neal underage, and I think he's really stepped up with Derry Senior, and he's been just absolutely brilliant to watch. And I think the TV footage, when he saw the replays, you know, I'm not really sure what the officials would have seen, and maybe they kind of get one snapshot of it, but it goes back to the whole concept of you have to be really, really sure what you're doing when you're kind of making these kind of sanctions. But, oh, he was raging. I mean, like, he threw one glove to the ground, and then he threw the second, and they didn't show his reaction. I was thinking when Emmett Bradley was sizing up that free, but I imagine he must have been furious looking at that as well. And I'd say Rory Gallagher was. And if that ends up being the thing that catches them, you know, I mean, they're still in a very, very good position. But like playing Galway next week and then their last games against Meath, you know, and like that would have been an unbelievable win for them to come back. And I know there was a big win there and all that, but the fact that they, like, Roscommon started the second half so well with the first couple of points, having had a 4-point advantage at half time, you know, Derry come back. They don't get the chance to win it. Then they get pegged back, obviously, for that late equaliser. It was a very, very kind of niggly game. Probably a sign of a lot at stake with the kind of the aggression on show and the intensity and all that. But, like, yeah, I think McGuigan has every right to be kind of furious, you know. It was, you know, it was clearly just like hands up, like, you know, I'm not getting involved in this. I'm really just trying to get up the field and kind of support my team and all that. And he was kind of punished for it. Like, and I think, yeah, like I was saying, I just think that the frustration is going to be all the more given what happened after that free chance.
Yeah.
You know?
Hey, Sully, when forwards have been targeted now, when these clutch situations are approaching, something very similar happened in the Dublin semi-final last year. Not good to see in the game. That might have been the year before. I think that was when Conor McHugh was getting held by, was it Declan O'Mahony? Might have held him around the middle of the field. And then he ended up getting his second card and couldn't appear for extra time, which was crucial for Nafina. It does make you think sometimes. It'd be no harm to have an element of VAR here. Obviously, very difficult. We're not the Premier League. We don't have, you know, multi-million. We don't have state-sponsored teams and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, we don't want to talk about your Everton and how rubbish they are. But we'll keep moving on this one because
it's football league relegation battles everywhere. I'm looking at the moment, like, you know.
Yeah, Galway beat Clare 2-8 to 1-5. So that's I think that maintains Galway's 100% record, and they're the only team in the country that have that. Just by the way, I mentioned the Patreon. I just want to show a little clip we had from last Thursday's show with an exclusive interview with Paddy Maher. So here he is having a good little chat.
You never would have been able to answer this before, but you might be able to answer it now. The way you used to creatively win frees when bursting out with the ball, was that something you developed over time? It was almost like, I think Henry Shefflin did it to Brendan Bugler one time. He said he was swimming, he started going like that. Was that something you consciously developed over time? Like, I'd say it's in the hundreds, the amount of frees you won, using that technique, shall we say, over the years.
Yeah, no, I've often got a bit of slagging or abuse over them, but like, because I always found I had to do something to get the free. You know, I had to show that, you know, that it was, you know, that I had to kind of exaggerate it a bit more. Like, if I felt, because I felt I wasn't probably getting them as easier as I could have, you know. So no, I wasn't saying I was going diving or anything, but like, I had to show the referee that I was being held or being pulled or something small, you know, like, and that's kind of where it just came from, really. I think you kind of built up a head of steam in after that.
And you know why you had to do that? Because it's a forwards game, and the referee will give a forward anything, and the back has to be absolutely killed nearly to win a free. And it's even worse now than ever before.
Well, yeah, that's the back's union, I suppose, isn't it, Michael? But we'd always say that. But yeah, well, maybe so. Maybe the back forwards are getting a bit more. But that's kind of one thing. I always had to kind of feel I had to show the referee that, you know, that I was kind of being pulled, or my hurley's being held or whatever, like, you know. But look, hopefully it worked more often than not.
So it was good crack with Paddy Maher chatting the other day. We went through all sorts of stuff from his career and how he's been getting through the last couple of months since having to retire. So patreon.com/OurGame. Division 1 round 5. I'll just run through the results then and we'll talk about a couple of the different ones. Armagh beat Kildare 112 to 10 points. Kerry beat Mayo 112 to 14. You were at that game. Dublin went up to Omagh and won by 13 points to 8. And Monaghan, they broke Donegal's 12-year unbeaten record at home in Ballybofey, 112, I should say, to 10 points here. And just to reflect, I suppose, on one of the first points from that, actually, even just to give the table at the moment, Kerry are top with 9, Mayo and Armagh have 7 each, then Donegal with 5, Monaghan 4, Tyrone and Kildare with 3, and Dublin with 2 points. So just to talk about, I suppose, first of all, about Kerry's win over Mayo, and you were down there to see it. Jack O'Connor said afterwards, the way we tackled was heartwarming. But I did talk to Andrew McLaughlin last week, former Kildare player, about it. And Kerry's steel. And he was talking about back in the day, they certainly had steel, the O'Shea's and all that. There were no choir boys. But what did you see out of Kerry? The fact that they saw this game out, horrible evening, strong opposition, and they got it done.
Yeah, big win for them, Shane. I think the comparison I would give in this terms of league have been at as well was when they drew with Kildare and Newbridge. Similar enough that day to that game in terms of an early first half goal, gives them a bit of a launch pad, have a lead at half time, but not able to close the game out and played really, really poorly in that second half. Only scored 3 points. Kildare kicked the last 4 points of the game. They had all the momentum, but Kerry couldn't find a way to get the winner. Whereas Saturday night, Mayo hopes are really, really kind of rising. I mean, at one stage it was 110 to 10 points, and they had a chance to go 4 clear. It was absolutely bizarre. Like, I looked down, I actually hadn't seen it. But it was the Paddy Clifford. Paddy Clifford took the free rather than David from 13 yards, and he basically just went to tap it. Didn't want to see this one, and it basically went straight into Rob Henley's arms. And Mayo went straight up the field and got a point or won a free with Ryan O'Donoghue, who was brilliant all night in terms of kicking those pressure kicks. And suddenly there was a massive swing, and you could see the kind of momentum shifting in the stadium. And next thing, Mayo get level, but Mayo don't get ahead. And I think the fact that Kerry went down the field and that Clifford got the point, I think Jack Connor was really, really happy to kind of come away from it because, I mean, as well as that, look, the personnel they were without. Like, it was interesting. You see these games, don't you? Especially league games when the injured players come in before the match. You know, the guys that aren't involved, and they kind of there's a row of seats for them in the stand. So it was at about 15 minutes to go. Like the stand before throwing, the stand is full, huge crowd there. And next thing there's a steward coming up and he's ushering it's like 4 or 5 fans, but basically it was like David Moore and Gavin White, Dan O'Donoghue, Sean O'Shea, and I didn't recognise who the fifth player was. But I was thinking, right, there's definitely 3 starters, possibly O'Donoghue as well, would be a 4th starter. You're going to have Paul Murphy and Paul Gainey to come into it as well. So you're looking at that situation, looking at the Kerry team, like to get a win out of it in those circumstances. Against, I think, what looks like one of the big rivals, to be honest. You know, both of them going really well, both of them unbeaten. I mean, Jack Connors kept on saying winning the league isn't a priority, but he then did touch on the fact that coming up against different systems and managing to win those games is the priority, and the fact that kept a clean sheet again, which I think is good in terms of last year, the last few years. Like, you know, like I was thinking about this, like if you think about Kerry's big championship exits, what kind of stands in your head? Like, to me, it's 2019, it's the Owen Murchan goal from the throw-in. 2020, obviously, the Mark Keane goal catches them at the very end. And then you can take your pick about the manner in which the goals were conceded last year against Tyrone, having scored 22 points and still lose. Like, so sometimes I wonder, you know, we can kind of go into in-depth analysis of that, and obviously there's more to it in terms of their defensive strategy and stopping them, but it looks like literally no goals is just a huge, huge thing for them at the moment. And Mayo had 2 good chances in the first half, but didn't take them. So I think very, very pleasing from Kerry's point of view. And I think they need this because just the way the format is in the football, like you and me have talked about in the hurling, how what do we read into this hurling when it's all going to kick off on Easter weekend? Whereas from Kerry's point of view, like the Football League final is done for April 2nd. After that, look, they're huge, huge favourites to win Munster. You're then going to be waiting for the All-Ireland quarterfinals to kind of get going again, and there'll be accusations, are they undercooked from the provincial action and all that. So it looks to me like they're trying to make the absolute most of these tests that they're getting at the moment in Division 1.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to bring in Paul Fitzpatrick now from the Anglo Celt. Paul, how are things with you? We might get you to center yourself in the middle of that there if we can.
might want to get a bigger camera for that job, Shane.
Go on, but come here. We obviously want to talk to you about Cavan as a Cavan man and following the team the whole time. Over the weekend, my Tipperary went up and showed you how football should be played up there in Cavan. But Cavan are still top of the division, 4 wins from 5. Playing pretty good stuff up to this point. Tipperary now, after a very ropey start to the season, drawn at Waterford, losing at home by 8 points to Leitrim, now on 7 points and looking good for a promotion push. But can you tell us how this game went? It finished up Tipperary 1-11, Cavan 1-7.
Yeah, I suppose it was Tipperary deserved it, I'd say, Shane, overall. First half, there was a very strong wind against Cavan. And Tipperary set up very defensively. So they're playing with the wind, but they were playing very defensively. And I know we can say that nearly every team is defensive now when they don't have the ball, but Tip were noticed to be defensive. And it actually worked out very well because they crowded the scoring zone. And Cavan had taken a couple of shots early on, including a mark from the edge of the D, which you'd expect them to put over. But the wind was so strong that those shots were dropping short. So you could see that Cavan were looking to work the ball into that pocket of space and guarantee them a clear point scoring opportunity, and the space just wasn't there. So Tip closed it out really well. So Tip went, I think, 4 or 5 points up. Coming up to half time, Cavan scored a great goal by Kevin O'Reilly. Tip had got a goal from Conor Sweeney, which was a well taken goal as well. But Kevin O'Reilly scored an excellent goal for Cavan, and that was the last kick of the ball in the first half, and left it 1-5 to 1-4 in favour of Tip at half time. And to be honest, I thought it was game over. The wind was so strong, going in 1 point down. I haven't played against that win. I thought Cavan are going to run away with this now in the second half. So it shows what I know. The Cavan coloured glasses were definitely on show there. But come out in the second half and Tip did very well. They managed the game very well. Now, I did think there was an element of a sort of freak about it in that Cavan missed 5 goal chances in the second half. The Tip goalkeeper O'Reilly made a brilliant save from James Smith at one stage. Cavan hit the crossbar twice. They had another couple of scrambles in the goal mouth where they sort of bombarded Tip, and Tip hung on. But I think they deserved it. They were sort of playing for their lives, whereas for Cavan, they had 1 foot in Division 3. They did 4 wins, they had 3 games, knowing that with the teams they had beaten, there's probably 5 teams in contention at the minute, and Cavan had already beaten a few of those. So they've got them on the head-to-heads, and Cavan had a good score difference as well. So, there's a lot of doom and gloom in Cavan at the minute. It's a real boom and bust with Cavan always. We always joke about everything's the worst ever in Cavan, and genuinely, I've been talking to people last night and this morning, and the amount of people have said to me, "That's the worst ever. It's the worst I've ever seen." And I don't think it's the worst ever, but it was bad. It was bad. Cavan had monopolised possession for long spells in the second half, and quite lateral in the middle of the field, even with the wind. And they still had if any of those goal chances had gone in, they did a massive penalty shout as well. Cormac O'Reilly seemed to be fouled near the end. I thought the referee did well in the game in general, but it did look like it was possibly a penalty for Cavan. But I thought Tip deserved it. And it's funny because Tip have had 4 wins in Kingspan Breffni now, going back to 2009. They've beaten Cavan 3 times, and they also won a qualifier there against Derry as well. So it's a happy hunting ground for Tip. But it's terrible for Cavan that Tip can come up and win in Breffni in big games 3 times. So we'll have to get you in the hurling, I think.
Yeah, that seems likely. All right, Fintan, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just on Paul. Are Cavan in a bit of a no-win situation with this Division 4? Because obviously the fact that they went down there was a big surprise, given it was only a year on since winning Ulster. And in terms of the locals and the fans, no matter what they do, they'll get promoted, and it'll be well, you should never have been down there in the first place. That is it just a matter of just getting this league campaign over and done with and just getting back out of there?
Yeah, I think so, Fintan. Yes, in Cavan, I suppose expectations tend to be unrealistic, and then when Cavan did win an Ulster Championship, which was unexpected in 2020, completely unexpected, and one of the great Ulster Championships, and Cavan have won a lot of them. Okay, you have to go back a long while for a lot of them, but that was one of the greatest of them all, considering the manner of it and the comebacks and beating 2 Division 1 teams along the way and so on, and especially coming off the back of getting relegated. So expectations sort of soared then, and then in classic Cavan style, relegated to Division 4 for the first time ever. And Cavan have had some poor teams down through the years and never ended up in Division 4 at any stage. So that was a total bust to boom to bust scenario in the space of a few months, which is kind of what we've come to expect from Cavan. I think getting out of Division 4, anything less than getting out of this division is a catastrophe, because the key thing with this Cavan team is, and even comparing it to Tipperary, they've been kind of lumped in together in the public consciousness in that they've both won long-awaited provincial titles on the same day, obviously in November 2020. But Tip have lost so many players of that team. I was looking at their their team yesterday. Like they only had 7 or 8 on the panel from that Munster final win. Cavan have almost everyone, so that excuse isn't there. Okay, Thomas Galligan was suspended yesterday, and Martin Riley was injured, but Cavan have managed to maintain or to retain almost all of those players. So this Cavan team now are basically at the top of their developmental cycle, and most of the players, especially the leading players, are in their late 20s now. Most of them have Ulster under 21 medals, and they've got Ulster senior medals. They've played a couple of campaigns in Division 1. So this is it for Cavan now. Cavan have got to make hay in the next year or two. So in the last few years, there hasn't been a big correlation between league form and championship form. So I suppose Cavan will be hoping that they can just leave Division 4 behind and go and turn it on again in the championship, because they've kind of, I suppose the supporters have been down on them a little bit in this league, particularly today now, but even in the previous 4 games. But they did win all 4, and they had the best defensive record and the best attacking record in the division. So I think from that point of view, they were probably just doing all right. They were doing all they could do, and they were blooding a few fellas. But yeah, failing to get out of this division now would probably signal the breakup of this team, really.
I've another question for you, Paul. Sorry, I'll let you back in a second there, Fintan. But Paul, just in terms of Tipperary, and I know obviously you were more focusing on Cavan when you're watching this game, but Tipperary are in a situation now where they started off with a draw and a loss, and they've now beaten Wexford. Sligo obviously had been playing quite well and put up 28 points on Carlow, and then they beat your own Cavan at home. Where do you think this Tipperary team is at? Do you think that this was a smash and grab type thing, and this sort of result wouldn't be repeated? Or do you feel like Tipperary now, after all the doom and gloom, the relegation, even losing so many players heading into this season, that Tipperary are on a bit of an upward curve and they're pulling this team together?
Well, to be honest, when I saw the result the first day where they drew with Waterford, I was shocked by that. I thought, because I think at this moment in time, Waterford are at the bottom of the pecking order in the country. Like they are bottom of Division 4, and I saw that result. They haven't picked up a point since that. And then the following week, they went and were well beaten at home by Leitrim. I think they put a better look on that scoreline. Like they were being hammered at one stage in that game, and I actually thought, looking from the outside in, like that's the end of Tip now. They've achieved their goal after 10 years of growth, and we're seeing Tip now start. The cycle is turned, and they're going to have to rebuild. But I thought that the win against Sligo was brilliant, because Sligo were coming in there looking like the form team of the division, had just beaten Carlow 28-5. And that was a great win. And that was a super win yesterday in Breffni. Like, it really was. Like, there were massive underdogs with the bookies coming up to Breffni. And to come up and, we're never behind really in the game. Like, the Cavan maybe went 1 point up at the start, but Tip were in front on the scoreboard, rode their luck at times. But I thought they've brought in some good players to replace those big names. Like obviously Fox is retired, Quinlivan is gone, and Maloney's gone travelling. There's loads of good players like that gone. But like they brought in Jack Kennedy on the 40, played very well yesterday. Their midfielder, Mark Russell, he was very impressive. I think he went off injured near the end. He was very impressive. Teddy Doyle, the Kerry man that spent wing forward, very good ball player, and he was impressive. And obviously Conor Sweeney, like he was being marked by a fellow 2020 All-Star, Pádraig Faulkner, and like he did a lot of damage on Pádraig, even though Faulkner cut out a lot of ball as well. But I thought Sweeney did lead the line very well, showed great leadership, took his goal well, and scored his frees. So I think it's been a big success story for Tip. Coming from where they are, after 2 rounds, they'd have been forgiven for throwing the towel in. But I actually think they'll get promoted now as well. I was looking at it earlier on. They play Carlow now, which would get, if they win that, and they'll be hot favourites to win that now at home, they go to 9, and then they've got another home game in the last round against London. So I think Tip are going to get to 11 and they're going to get promoted, which is a hell of an achievement considering they're only 1 point after 2 rounds.
Can we talk about the situation with Cavan and Antrim in the Ulster Football Championship coming up? Antrim have lost home advantage, so they were drawn at Corrigan Park, considered not big enough, 3,500 capacity there. Can you give your perspective? Like if I was an Antrim player, I'd be like, I don't care what size capacity this venue has. We have home advantage, and that's a pretty crucial thing in a championship game. We don't want it moved out of there. Can you give me the Cavan point of view? Like, you've watched this whole situation unfold. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I'll give you my point of view, because my point of view mightn't just chime with the Cavan point of view. But I think most Cavan supporters are of the opinion that Cavan are right to dig their heels in. And I suppose it's probably easy for me sitting in the press box. I haven't seen them a lot in the last couple of years, particularly when they won Ulster. Like, all the Cavan support miss out on that. So people are probably desperate to see them in the championship. Personally, I think the key point to it is you'd have to ask what sort of an attendance was this game we were going to get first and foremost. The Colin work on the Sunday game last night, who was very familiar with Cavan football, so I thought he was off in his analysis where he actually mentioned the figure of 15,000. Not in the month of Sundays would Cavan and Antrim in an Ulster quarter-final get 15,000. The last time Cavan played Antrim in an Ulster quarter-final in Belfast, the attendance was 7,096. I actually checked it back in 2000. That was 2008. In 2003, Cavan played them up there, and the attendance was given as 7,000. In 2005, I couldn't find an attendance for the replay, but we played them in Breffni in the first round, and the attendance was 10,000. And I can guarantee you, it would have been a few thousand less than that, because a lot of Cavan people wouldn't have gone to that replay, having played poorly the first day out. So I think first and foremost, you have to ask how many people are not going to get into this game. I know Colin O'Rourke also made the point about the Cavan farmers aren't going to want to spend the money on the diesel going up to Belfast. But there's a bit of truth in that too, though, because the price of fuel makes it a very expensive day out now as well. It's a good spin up from parts of Cavan to get to Corrigan Park in the city. Like, it's going to be a couple of hours. It's going to be an expensive day. I don't think you are going to get anywhere near 10,000 or anything like that. You're probably looking at 7,000. Like when Antrim played Tyrone in the championship a couple of years ago, it was 5,400 at the game. That was played in the athletic grounds. So Antrim don't have the biggest support in the country either. Now, the only thing is that their team is going very well at the minute. So that's the first point. I think that there's not going to be tens of thousands of people not getting in to see this game, first and foremost. The second thing is, I think it brings a lot of bad publicity on Cavan. And I know social media, you can't read too much into it, and there's going to be a lot of rubbish on social media. But there was a lot of toxic comments going the way of Cavan on social media the last week or so since this story came out. I just think that it's probably not Antrim's fault that they're in this situation. Like, Cavan could just as easily find themselves in this situation where they don't have a ground. It was taken out of their own hands, and you'd like to think that they wouldn't be sort of, I won't say kicked when they're down, but they might get a helping hand there. Like, if you look at it, Antrim are victims of circumstance up there with the Cason Park mess, which is an absolute shambles, whatever has gone on there. And it's never really been fully revealed who was at fault there, but someone made a big boo-boo there in closing that ground when they did. And Antrim have kind of made the most of what they've had since then. Like, if there was £1 million put into Corrigan Park, personally speaking, taking off the Cavan jersey for a minute, I would say go ahead and play it. And if a few thousand people don't get in, and that's what you're talking about. You're talking about 2,000 or 3,000 here. Like, you're not talking about 20,000 not getting into the game. That's my opinion on it. But at the same time, someone made the point to me, and I thought it was a fair point, that Cavan have a very good stadium in Breffni Park, and the clubs have paid for a big part of that. There's levies on clubs, and clubs have to go out and fundraise and give money in towards this. So Cavan have a home that can be very much proud of there. So Cavan will look at it and go, well, we have this, why don't you have something like, along the lines of what we have invested and sweated to provide here in Cavan. So it's a tricky one, but personally speaking, when you look at all the backlash and all that Cavan are going to get, and it possibly won't even end up being moved out of Corrigan Park now. I was reading earlier on a piece by Damien Lawler. He said Antrim are still confident that the game will go ahead at Corrigan Park. So you go through all that, and you get all that negativity directed towards you, and then you don't achieve anything by the end of it. And what you actually do is probably bolster Antrim and create a siege mentality, and we saw that with Kildare a couple of years ago as well. So overall, I think from that point of view, it's a bit of a disastrous story for Cavan.
Yeah, the spirit of Newbridge or nowhere. And I remember once we were doing a group interview with then GA President Liam O'Neill about Dublin having all these advantages in terms of population and having universities on their doorstep and facilities, and just I suppose the amount of people that they can pick from in terms of players coming through and all that. And he said, well, there's a fact of life that some people do better than others, and obviously some counties are going to do better than others. And Antrim are maybe in a situation where people have made bad decisions, so they don't have a stadium. Maybe they don't have quite as many people. They have a lot of adult clubs and a lot of adult club players, but maybe not every part of the county is into the GA. So should the people who are who have put everything into it throughout their life be punished just because the situation is now that they don't have a stadium suitable for purpose? Fintan, where do you fall on this debate?
First, actually, Paul's quite interesting to listen there in terms of the insight he got. Like all things are a bit more kind of nuanced when you kind of tease them out and you kind of get different angles. I hadn't really thought about kind of the levy aspect of it, which is a good point in terms of you're looking at kind of what work you've done. I mean, the fundamental part is obviously the Cason Park mess, and this is the kind of situation. But I do agree with the whole aspect of, and this has happened so many times, that GA people getting up in arms over games being played in smaller venues. For example, there's various cries at loads of times that should be played in Cork Park, or that should be played in Thurles, or whatever the biggest ground is in a provincial. But like Paul has done it down there. We actually drilled down over the years to these sort of things, like how many people are actually missing out. Like people wildly overestimate, I think, at times in advance how many people are going to be at some of these games. And like there is a, like, touching something we talked about earlier, Shane, like there isn't going to be an impact in this year's summer championship with the price of fuel all across the country. Like if it keeps going the way it is in terms of attendances, if games are live on TV, people are going to kind of opt to stay put. I simply for Antrim, I mean, if it's become the kind of home and away thing, I think it probably should stay there. I mean, some of the kind of commentary towards Cavan, like, I think it's kind of the wrong aspect of it. Like some people were kind of saying, well, it was good enough for the Dublin footballers and Waterford hurlers over the last couple of years, so that Cavan are too good, or think they're too good for Cork and Park, which I think is kind of a bit wide of the mark in terms of taking that slant of it. And sometimes you could probably maybe read too much into the social media commentary when you actually kind of drill down how much percentage of this is it that it's done. But I think ultimately, probably maybe they should just leave it as it is. Like I think I agree that it is become this kind of inflamed subject. I mean, a lot of cases this time of year, people are kind of looking for kind of some talking point to kind of latch onto that's outside of the games, and between this and the kind of the GPA expenses route, it has become one of the ones that's kind of, I suppose what caught the imagination, kind of inflamed it that way. But I kind of would have sympathy on both counts. Probably think it should probably left as it is at the moment for Cork and Park at this stage.
Yeah, Paul.
So, one point in that, Shane, as well. Sorry, just to touch on something Fintan said there. Cavan actually were redoing their pitch a couple of years ago, and it was a year. I can't remember who the first round of the championship was. I think it might have been away against Donegal. So they chose that summer to do it because they weren't going to miss out on a home championship first round game. But they ended up in the qualifiers and got home games. Pretty sure they were drawn at home against Tyrone and Down in the qualifiers. And they actually did go and play those games in Brewster. So that's another aspect to it, because there is a second county grounds in Cavan and Kingscourt, which I'm not saying it's up to Cork and Park levels, but it wasn't bad. It has hosted National League games. So Cavan will probably point to that look, we were in a position where we didn't have our home grounds and we went to a neutral venue rather than bring people to a sort of a substandard venue. But yeah, it's a very tricky one.
Just in terms of like where counties fall, in terms of like how they're treated, respected, I suppose, the way they would talk sometimes. Like Antrim are obviously operating in Division 3, but they haven't had huge traditional success in the Ulster Championship, unlike Cavan, who obviously are a blue ribbon team, as I'm sure you'd like to tell us. But like, I just wonder about some of the smaller teams in terms of publicity. Like, and Antrim digging their heels in. I mean, small teams, smaller profile teams can sometimes be ignored. Look at the 2020 All-Ireland Championship. It went ahead without Sligo when they had that raft of COVID cases. And I wonder, would that have happened with a bigger county if, for example, Dublin couldn't field the team? And obviously, the 2021 All-Ireland semi-final was delayed for Tyrone, and that was in the later stages of the championship, so you can understand why. And then Kildare obviously won their round 2018. Is there anything to do with, like, Asher, look, it's only Antrim, they're not the biggest deal around, that sort of a narrative, and even the fact that they got so little support in the vote the other night?
Yeah, there could be something in that, all right. Now, in Cavan, like we would say, well, I'm not saying we would say, but some people would say in Cavan that the Ulster Council sometimes there tends to be a click towards the Northern counties. Certainly over the years in Cavan, you'd always hear people complain about referees. There was a Northern referee in Cavan in an Ulster Championship game at minor under 21 or whatever. People would be complaining. I think a lot of that is just sort of an old wives' tale, but there could be something in that. Yeah, I think possibly if it was Tyrone, for example, it mightn't have happened. But if you think back to around, and Fintan will probably know better than me, about 7 or 8 years ago, Tyrone tried to get a Donegal game moved out of McCool Park on similar grounds, that it wasn't going to be fit to hold the crowd, and Donegal dug their heels in. And I don't know, did it go to a vote at an Ulster Council meeting or whatever, but it ended up that Tyrone ended up giving back some of their allocation of tickets, so they didn't even end up selling out what they would have. So it's a tricky one. The funny thing is with Cavan and Antrim, just slightly on the tangent, is that Cavan are probably a little bit too far south to be in the immediate layer in Ulster. Cavan are in a bit of a twilight zone there, because the Irish News is a very big GA publication in Ulster, and like they would cover Antrim very, very well, and they cover Derry and Tyrone and Armagh as well, and Down. But Cavan, even though they do cover Cavan very well, but Cavan are sometimes just a little bit too far south to be considered sort of a northern county, and yet we're still Ulster, so we're still apart from the other provinces. So Cavan have our own complaints.
Of all the Ulster teams in the league tiers at the moment, Cavan are the lowest of the lot. But do you feel like going into the Ulster Championship, Cavan are the worst team?
If you ask any Cavan supporter today, they'd say it was the worst ever. Yeah, no, it's so hard to put your finger on where Cavan are at, like, because let's say we've beaten 2 Division 1 counties in the championship in the last 3 championships. Like, we've beaten Monaghan twice and we've beaten Donegal, but we're after losing to a Division 4 team now in the league, and we lost to a Division 4 team last year in the league, essentially in Wicklow in that playoff. Like, so it's very hard to put your finger on exactly where Cavan are. The only thing I can say with certainty is that it's the most experienced team that Cavan have ever, because you go back to, say, when Cavan were really successful in the 40s and 50s and even into the 60s when Cavan were very, very successful in Ulster. There weren't as many games played. And you at the current Cavan team, when Cavan are at full strength, the average appearances on that team would be well into the 70s. There's huge experience in the Cavan team. There's huge amount of medals won by this Cavan team as well. Like, you've got 4 or 5 players on the team who've got Ulster minor, under 21 and senior medals now. They've played a couple of campaigns in Division 1. So I just can't accept that this isn't a good Cavan team, because if this is the Cavan team at its best, basically. This is them at the sort of peak of their developmental cycle now. So I do think it's a good Cavan team, and I think that we've got good cover in a lot of positions. Like Thomas Gallagher, obviously an all-star, was missing yesterday. Kieran Brady is coming back from a cruise ship. There are players come back in. Martin Riley's another, like, people who remember him playing really well against Dublin in the All-Ireland semi-final. There are still players to come back in. There's a lot of young forwards in the Cavan team. The last few years, the big complaint about Cavan has been that they haven't been producing scoring forwards, which is valid criticism. But they've actually brought through quite a few now. But it reminds me of Malachy Clark's line about, if you think you've got 5 Derby winners in the stable, then you've probably got none. But there are half a dozen young forwards there, so we're waiting on 1 or 2 of those lads to sort of hopefully step up and kind of elevate their game. And every week there's a different fella doing it. So yeah, I do think it's a good Cavan team, and I think they will prove it now in the championship. Like, you look at it yesterday, they brought Killian Clark off the bench. Like, there's no other team in Division 4 would have an international rules player to bring in like that. He's coming back from injury, fair enough, but I do think there's a lot of experience, and it's just disappointing yesterday because they've been around the block long enough now that they should have had the wherewithal just to win that game, regardless of a dodgy penalty call or hitting the crossbar a few times or whatever. Good teams find a way to win those games, so that was disappointing. But I felt that a big factor was that there wasn't really and truly that much riding on that game for Cavan. I know you could say promotion, but Cavan are still probably 20-1 on to get promoted. Cavan have to go to play London, then they've Waterford at home in the last round, who are the bottom team in Division 4. A win in either of those games should get Cavan promoted, so they probably wanted a little bit more. But yeah, no, I honestly think Cavan could make a good stab at this championship, definitely.
Fintan, just even to broaden it out a little bit, of all the Ulster teams at the moment, who are you most impressed by? Obviously, Tyrone are All-Ireland champions, but they've got just a win and a draw from their 5 games. They lost 13 points to 8 at home to Dublin over the weekend. Armagh have shown quite well, winning 3 and drawing 1 of their 5 games. Donegal, good and bad, wasn't overly impressed by what I saw against Monaghan. And there's obviously a couple of other teams Stephen Poacher talked about down in obviously not too positive a light. Of all these teams, who do you think is kind of, showing best?
I suppose probably haven't seen enough of Cavan. Obviously, the games aren't covered enough on TV, so you don't kind of get enough sense of the highlights and all that. But I suppose of the teams I have seen, it's probably Armagh and Derry are probably the 2 that have jumped in. I mean, Armagh, what I'm kind of impressed by is the fact that the headline grabbing thing was the win over Dublin and how good Rian O'Neill was in that game, and obviously the fact the team that they beat and where they were beating them and all that, it created, so plenty of talking points out of that. But in fairness, I think they've kind of backed it up since. Only losing once against Mayo, granted, but that's last year's All-Ireland finalists. But even the way they negotiated Saturday night, okay, maybe Kildare are a team that would be viewed as comparable to them, but win by 5 points, just that getting into that bit of consistency. And would have felt at the start of the year, like, I was saying to you earlier that Jack O'Connor's been saying that Kerry don't want to win the league title or whatever, but I think from Armagh would be the kind of team in Division 1 that a league title would be fantastic for them, and they're now in with a shout. Obviously home to Kerry next week, and I mean, like, if they looked at that from the start of the league and thought with 2 rounds to go they'd be in this position where if they get something out of that they'll be in a great position then going into the last game. So I think they must be really happy. Derry, I suppose, they're just mad team to kind of figure out in terms of the league sense that, you know, it'll be contested the 2014 Division 1 league final, went all the way down to Division 4 after, and most likely will be back up, I think, to Division 1 now. Yesterday, I think, was probably very good for them from the point of view that it was, it'll frustrate them, I think, not winning that game against Roscommon, but the way Division 2 has been so strange, it's such a split, like there's a massive gulf in standard, it's looked like on result terms anyway, between the top and the bottom, but a lot of Derry's early games were against those sides at the bottom, like they beat Offaly down in Cork. They still now, they've Galway, obviously, like yesterday, and Galway are the two kind of biggest tests, but I mean, the way they kind of came back from that, 6 points down early in the second half, still haven't conceded a goal, which is kind of a stat that kind of jumps out at you. I was only looking at the highlights yesterday, so I didn't see the Roscommon, miss any kind of blatant goal chances, but certainly the kind of bits that I've seen, they've been very, very kind of good in that sense in defence, and they were in a kind of a strange championship last year. I think it was one of the championships where a lot of people were like, thank God we're gone away from the kind of the knockout system, but it was the standout game that I can remember from the early rounds, that Derry-Donegal game, and you're looking at them, do they have the promise? But in the old days, they would have had a chance at a qualifier system, so you're like, where is that momentum going to go? But I think it's a credit to the kind of player and management setup that they haven't lost that, and they've kind of built in it throughout this year's league, and looking a very, very good position to get to Division 1. So they'd probably be the two, looking at the form so far. I think they both camps would be very, very happy with the way they're going.
Yeah, and Paul, I'd like to ask you the same one now. I know you're going to Cavan games most weekends, so I'm not sure if you're getting to see quite as much of the teams in Division 1 and 2, which you're so far away from at the moment. But all jokes aside, and I know you were out covering handball watching handball over the weekend as well, but of the Ulster teams at the moment, who's impressing you the most? And do you think Tyrone can sort of rouse themselves from their current malaise?
Yeah, I think they definitely can, but I do think they were the weakest All-Ireland champions in a good few years. And in fairness,
can you explain what you mean by
that? I think that after a team, you get a really dominant superpower. Sometimes you get a period of flux for a couple of years where a team can nip in and win. Even at county championship level, you see this, where maybe the standard drops a little and a team can nip in and win one or maybe two. And I think Tyrone fit the profile of that team. I couldn't see this Tyrone team doing what the Tyrone team did under Mickey Hart and win 3 in 6 years. I just don't think so. And I think that they just sort of nipped in there in the post-Dublin era. Mayo did the hard work for them. They're fully deserving winners in the All-Ireland final. But there was a kind of a whole narrative around the All-Ireland semi-final that Kerry were atrocious. The post-mortems were very, very clinical down in Kerry. Kerry were absolutely atrocious and Tyrone were absolutely brilliant. And yet Tyrone beat them by 1 point after extra time. So, that probably suggests that Tyrone had to play absolutely out of their skins to beat a Kerry team who were playing poorly on the day. I know Clifford went off as well. So I think that they really wrung a lot out of them last year, and I couldn't see them winning another All-Ireland this year. I'd be very surprised if they do. But can they bounce back? They could definitely bounce back and win an Ulster title, because they seem to be able to beat Monaghan when it comes to it. Donegal, I don't know what's going on there. They're just in quicksand. They don't seem to be playing anywhere near the potential. I think Derry and Armagh, but particularly Derry, I think are the team that are best placed to come on maybe and shake it up in Ulster the next couple of years. And you might be aware of this, but at underage level, at Ulster Colleges level, right down to under 14, and in Ulster Colleges it's done in half years. So you've under 14 and a half, under 15 and a half, under 16 and a half. Derry are dominating there, especially with St. Pat's Maharad. They're churning out serious teams. So Derry are here for the long haul now for the next few years. So I think if it's a Derry supporter, you're definitely looking forward to a few great years. So they might be the ones, but no, Tyrone definitely not convincing.
Just one final question before I let you go. And again, I don't think you've had a chance to watch Monaghan's win in Donegal. And even the way you're talking about them there, you're not overly impressed. But do you think there's a chance that they were this common team and that it might actually, their window may now be closing, that explains why their team is playing a little bit simply at the moment? And I think it was, I'm not sure if it was Colm O'Rourke who might have been saying last night that the likes of maybe Ryan McHugh, Michael Murphy and players like this, they're not quite operating at the same level as they had been in previous years. So do you think that their window might actually be closing?
Yeah, but I don't think Murphy is the man he was, because you have to remember that even though he's 33 or whatever he is, he's got so much miles on the clock, and he's been just an absolute force of nature for so long that I have had the sense in the last couple of years that he's not the player that he was. And like he was their talisman, obviously. Colin O'Rourke picked out Paddy McBrearty, Ryan McHugh, and Michael Murphy, and kind of said that Murphy's getting a lot of injuries, and McHugh and McBrearty have lost their form a bit, which is fair enough. McHugh has 3 Ulster medals. One of those was won, and McBrearty. So let's say in the post All Ireland era, from 2014 on, those lads have got 3 Ulster medals. The 2014 one was won with the bones of Jim McGuinness's team. So really, you have to go to 18 and 19 when McHugh and McBrearty were kind of among the top dogs there for Donegal. So it's not like they were dominant for years and years, and these lads were totally underpinning it. Not really. Like there was only a few years where they were kind of the main men. Like McNeilish has gone off at it as well again. So I don't think the window is closing. No, I do think they have enough young talent there. Like I've seen enough of their underage teams playing against Cavan in recent years. They had a brilliant under-20 team there about 3 or 4 years ago that got caught by Dublin in an All-Ireland semi-final. They had a very busy schedule. They had a good few seniors on it, but they were an extraordinarily good team with Langan and all those lads. So if they could get the likes of him back into the team, I think the chances there. Maybe it's gone a bit stale with the management. Maybe that could be the issue there, but I still think they've got the players. Definitely think they have the players. The big criticism of them for a few years there was that they didn't have the defenders. But I think like the likes of McMenamin is a greatly improved player. I think Owen Bon Gallagher is a top class player. Like I do think they probably have enough there. Like they have a brilliant goalkeeper as well, even though he kind of made a mistake in the Ulster final that Cavan were glad of, but he is a brilliant goalkeeper. I think they've got enough there. They're just underperforming. I don't think it's a thing that their chances pass. No.
Yeah. Sean Patton made a couple of brilliant saves in that game. Paul, you've been brilliant with your time, and hopefully we'll be chatting to you again soon. And people keep an eye out for the We Are Cavan podcast. I made a rare appearance on it last week, but who knows? I might be back on it again if there's could there be a Division 4 league final between Tip and Cavan yet?
Yeah, Cavan don't want to see Tip again for another few years.
You'll never be invited back, Shane. You're done with it.
Look, thanks very much, Paul. We'll chat to you again soon.
Thanks a million, Shane.
Okay, that was Paul Fitzpatrick of the Anglo Celt there. So what about Monaghan then? Do you see them as a team now that's ready to kick on? Andrew Woods got a nice goal, but it was sloppy Donegal defending that allowed him to steal in for it. So what are your thoughts on Monaghan?
Well, I greatly admire their ability to continually survive in Division 1. Well, obviously that's not definite yet, but like to continually put themselves in with a shout. Like, you know, they are... Obviously, last year was the most heroic kind of last gasp thing of all with the Jack McCarran point against Galway, but they really do wring the last drop out of themselves. Bringing in someone like Andrew Woods, the continuously kind of pushing on, like that's a brilliant win for them yesterday. No one, like the stat is no one's won in Ballybofey since 2010. You saw what Tyrone a couple of weeks ago in the driving seat at half time against Donegal, and they couldn't finish the job in the second half. So it's obviously, it's not an easy place to go, and the fact that like Donegal were bringing in Murphy. So I just think it's a kind of absolute credit to Monaghan once again to kind of put themselves in this position. I mean, they're up to 5th in the table now, just looking at it here. Tyrone, Kildare and Dublin below them. So, like, what is it? They're at home to Dublin the last game next weekend. Off the top of my head, is it Kildare that they're playing? I think it is in Newbridge next Sunday. That's probably one that they could win, even though it is a difficult place to go. But I mean, that would be an unbelievable position to be in heading into the last game against Dublin if you're on 6 points. So. Great kind of a boost for themselves, kind of in a similar position to Donegal, like the conversation you're talking about there in terms of is the chance gone? I mean, you're thinking that 2018 All-Ireland semi-final and that being the chance for that generation to get to a final. Obviously, I know the team has changed a bit since then, but they kind of still keep going on, and I think kind of getting the most out of themselves. Whereas, like you talked about Donegal there, like it's just the question mark is over them just in these big kind of tight knockout championship games when it comes to it. I kind of agree with Paul. I think there's a bit of a staleness there, possibly on the management side, but there's just something not quite. They have a lot going for them. They're kind of maybe 4/5 of the way there, but it's just trying to get in that last bit over the line. And I'd say seeing Tyrone manage to kind of, the Barface kind of sneak in for an All-Ireland last year when there was a bit of a gap in the market. And fairness to them, they took the chance and when it was coming. I think for both Donegal and Monaghan, I would say that would stick with them a bit. Like they probably would have. Look, they were the 3 kind of market leaders in Ulster. I don't know what the stat is. The Cavan win aside, they won maybe the guts of the ones for the last 10 or 12 years. I'd say between the 3 of them, they probably scooped them up. Since Armagh 08, I think they've won them all. So, they were the benchmark, and then Monaghan and Donegal are looking over Tyrone and saying, well, they're the ones that got in for the All-Ireland. And now the issue is kind of going back to what I was saying. I kind of think Derry and Armagh are probably on the rise a bit. Like, so you're wondering, are those the 2 that are going to come along I don't know the draw off the top of my head now for Ulster this year, but it definitely does look like it's between maybe slight stalling of a couple of the top teams and the rise, I think, of those two. I think it's going to be a very interesting championship.
Yeah, definitely will. And like what Stephen Poacher was saying earlier about our man, Stephen, and that Kieran McGeeney has gotten rid of the bluffers. Very interesting points he was making there. And they got over the line against Kildare. Absolutely rotten conditions there. Andrew Murnan, he kicked in a rebound straight off the ground. Soccer style, which is a term that's used in GA, soccer style. I don't know how it's never stuck. We've never come up with a term for just kicking the ball on the ground first time. Like you'd say pull on the ball in hurling. What could you actually say in Gaelic football?
I don't know, but it's the soccer style is just the default one for anything that's done. Although on that, in terms of if there's a soccer bit, did you see the clip of Dermot O'Connor's dummy on Saturday night? Like, you know,
Conor McManus did something very similar actually against Donegal. I don't know if you saw that. He did a bit of a step.
No, I did see that one. Okay, right.
Yeah, so that's coming in vogue now.
You can use the phrase soccer style for what O'Connor did there, you know. We'll allow that, like, you know. But any sort of a goal which isn't kicked from the hand is immediately, you know. Then there is obviously the one as well. The palm at the back post is often referred to as basketball style to the net, like, you know. It's like have to compare to another sport.
I would consider that more volleyball style, but that's more me. Do you know actually the best soccer style incidents I can think of in football are Jamie Brennan. I think he was playing for the Donegal under 21s, maybe against Derry, and he did a soccer style run with the ball. He must have gone 40 yards with it. I can't remember if he scored directly or if there was a rebound or something like that. It was a great run. And then the other one, Darren O'Sullivan, the back flick against Limerick at Croke Park. In 2011, the ball was played across and he did a flick between the legs, like Lee Sharp against Barcelona in 94-ish.
I'll go back the years for another one. There's the Fionn Murray bicycle kick in Porky Quay for Cork against Waterford. And there was also, I think, Martin Daly Clare did something similar as well in a game, which is kind of worth checking out, I think, for a point, kind of a back heel point. But they're proper ones. Like the Darren Sullivan one is, I was going to say the Zola for Chelsea Norwich, but like definitely there's people watching this one with a clue who Zola was or when he was playing, like, you know. So when we're reaching for Lee Sharp and Zola for our comparisons, there's surely a more contemporary one we could go for, you know.
Yeah, and actually the very best soccer style of all was Nicky English kicking the ball to the Cork net in well back in the day from about 14, maybe even 21 yards out. That was unreal. A couple of the other results that we haven't talked about quite so much in over the weekend. Tyrone 8 points, Dublin 13. Now we obviously talked a little bit about Tyrone, but Dublin had 8 different scores. And having watched the game, I wondered, you know, what's different here with Dublin? Is it Tyrone being bad, Dublin being good, maybe having a couple of key men back? And we saw the likes of Owen Merchant, he was reintroduced. Now they're home to Donegal next and then away to Monaghan. And if Dublin win those games and hope that Tyrone or Kildare lose one of theirs, they can stay up. But what did you think? Was this about Dublin being good? Because like Tyrone were scoreless for 27 minutes in the first half. Like look at the discipline of Frank Burns to do the late hit on Evan Comerford, which denied Con Kilpatrick a goal there. That would have made it 11 points to 1-2, and all of a sudden you're back in the game. And then obviously Boric Hampsey getting both of his cards. Both of them were needless. Late hit on Tom Lahiff around midfield when the ball just wasn't there and there was nothing to be gained by doing it. And then obviously the dunt on Cormac Costello over the sideline basically in the stands. So I'm just wondering, is this a Tyrone discipline thing and they have a bit of catching up to do? Can you hear me okay there, Fintan?
Yeah, sorry to last year. Yeah, so I think I got the gist of what you were looking for. Yeah, like definitely a bit of flaws in the Tyrone system, but I thought a lot of it was about Dublin. I thought it was just a performance that kind of smacked of what they've been producing over the last 7-8 years in different aspects of their attacking play. The way they were kind of pulling them apart in defence, kind of switching the play from left to right. But it just struck me, like, with all the talk about the kind of the team and all that and about different guys are unavailable, looking at the side, we're just looking at the straight start 15. It's an unbelievably strong side like that they had out yesterday. You know, when you look at it, I mean, you know, all kind of established guys. Okay, Lahiff has maybe kind of played the early rounds of the championship, but like I think he's been a brilliant club player for Jews. Like, but like the forward line, Howard, Bugler, Scully, Costello, Kilkenny, Rock, you know, maybe they don't have the backup that they had before in terms of like the outrageous kind of 6 subs that they were bringing on against was it the Mayo 2017 game that it's like, you know, it's Connolly, Flynn, Brogan, you know, kind of a who's who of the greats of the game. Like, but you're still bringing on McCarthy and Merchant yesterday. But in terms of kind of a starting sextet, the way Brian Fenton is kind of making space and popping over a really good point. Bugler, that they pull Tyrone apart and he's able to get one. Even for the Hampsey black card, that Lehiff, it's a really, really swift counter-attack and they're kind of moving at pace up the field. An element as well, I think, similar to what you were talking earlier about Tipperary Cavan, their need is greater. Like, they do not want to go down, and that relegation would really kind of puncture the aura, I think, of them if it did happen. But now I think if they hadn't got anything out of this game, you would have been under real pressure, because even it might not have been good enough with Donegal and Monaghan, but I think they must be really fancying their chances now in terms of a Sunday afternoon game in Croke Park, and then they'll go to Clonus, and then, suppose kind of have that momentum behind them. But there was actually a really good column which is kind of linked to this. I thought, I know you read it. Ian Fitzmaurice on Saturday in the Examiner was basically comparing it to 2013 when he was in charge of Kerry.
He lost his first 4 games, didn't he?
Lost 4 games, yeah. And he was talking about the mood after the 4th game. I don't you see that story about the pizzeria? I thought it was funny that the nutritionist had come to him that week and said it'd be a good thing now to kind of get the lads pizza after the game, and then we'll have the post-match meal somewhere down the country. He said professional teams do this so they get the immediate carb hit, and it's kind of a reward for a good performance. But he said he had in his head, okay, right, but we're going to have got to win in Ballybuffet. As it was, they lost the game. There was some breakdown of communication, so the pizzas weren't exactly delivered to the dressing room, but they had to walk down the town, go into this pizzeria after losing 4 games, and basically queue up with all the Donegal locals and get the food. But there's some good anecdotes in it. Like, but one of the lines was interesting, and I suppose we don't know whether this is the case in the Dublin setup or not. But he basically just said, like, if things are well organised on the pitch, and if there's enough of a plan, and if training ground form is going well, and everyone knows where this is heading, you just stick with it. You don't lose faith in it just because the results are bad. And this is actually brought up, I saw, by David Power after they lost to, I think it was Leitrim. He said the training ground form is very good, and now you might say, maybe at the time people would be kind of cynical and say, like, Asher, of course he's going to say that, like, but he kind of reiterated it in 2 or 3 different ways. You just see what they've done since, like, the fact that they beat Cavan, like, was there a sense of that look, lads, the results are kind of lying in terms of our form a bit, like, and we actually are in a good shape. But I just thought it was interesting in terms of Dublin. You wonder, was that the case over the last couple of weeks? The senior players in the dressing room and Farrell and all this would be kind of stressing, look, this is going to come right. We just got to get through this sticky patch, And I did think, even though they lost it, there was definitely signs against Kildare that it was starting to come right, with just a couple of goal chances, which was hard to understand how the ball didn't open the net that day.
Yeah, even from the very first one, early on, Aaron O'Neill made a good save from Brian Fenton, but normally you'd expect Brian Fenton to nail that. And, like, he showed well, I think, in that game up in Omagh. Like, that point he got from the 45, he barely stroked it and it flew over the bar, and you're thinking, okay, there's a sign here that that Dublin are on their way back. They mightn't be what they were, but they're still going to be highly competitive. And, like, do you see them now as a realistic All-Ireland contender? Again, after 3 or 4 games, it's easy to start, people want the dramatic dismissal of Dublin as a force and what have you. But you still imagine they're going to get through Leinster. Even if Kildare have now kind of struck a blow by getting that first victory in 21 years or whatever it's been. Meath, they started very, very poorly. Obviously, there was that the vote even to keep Andy McEntee on as manager. But now they're showing a couple of things that would make you think, okay, maybe they can muster a good burst this season. But where do you put Dublin in the hunt? Do you put them in the same pack up there with Kerry, Mayo? I suppose Tyrone by default has been champions, but their form's a bit off.
Yeah, I'd probably still put them in the top 4. I still looking at them as an All-Ireland semi-finalists, unless, I think they'll win Leinster, unless they're going to get a quarter-final draw that's going to be tricky. I don't know if Mayo or Galway come through the back door, or maybe a Derry or someone possibly could catch them in a quarter-final stage. But whether, look, I don't think it's going to be like a situation a couple of years ago when they got to the semi-finals and you'd be like installing them as overwhelming favourites straight away. I think we are in a bit of a state of flux in GA in terms of we're in a bit of a, or say Gaelic football, in terms of a bit of a transitionary period as regards who's going to come along, kind of the post the Dublin superpower era. They themselves will come back to the pack a bit, but I mean everyone else, like there's question marks over them. Like Tyrone are the champions, but it's just the challenge for them to, I suppose, that phrase, they're now being hunted rather than being the hunter. Can they do it back to back? It was something that was beyond the great side of the 2000s. They weren't able to do it. Kerry, there's obviously been question marks ever since 2014 in terms of trying to do it at that stage, and Mayo obviously trying to get the job done at the final say. So I think there's a bit of a leveling off. I think it's really, really interesting. They'd be the top 4 at the moment, but I think the interesting thing is the capacity for someone to come and kind of disturb that stranglehold. I mean, there's I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but the amount of championships over the last few years that quartet have been the All-Ireland semi-finalists, Dublin, Mayo, Tyrone and Kerry. Just the nature of the draw, like all the contenders I'm talking with that are kind of looking well, you're probably looking at Derry and Armagh, maybe Galway and Roscommon. None of them are in Dublin's province, so they don't really have to worry about it. Like Kildare probably being the one threat, but it's still a sizable task to go from last year's Leinster final where they competed but didn't really seriously threaten. Okay, winning a league game is a good positive step, but you know it will be a major step up to try and replicate that in Croke Park and the Leinster. So I thought they'd sit back over the last couple of weeks, but just in the overall kind of landscape, I didn't really see where they had completely gone. Now, I think if they get to that Ireland semi-final stage, you'll need a step up in performance, not just with this year's league in mind, but even the way they played against Mayo last year. Like, it's kind of forgotten in how good, I suppose, how thrilling and how memorable a moment it was to see Mayo finally beat Dublin after extra time, and the drama that it went with the Henley free and all that. Like, but you know, Dublin, that game slipped completely out of their grasp in a position when they really should have been they really were in the driving seat, and you really would have been expecting them to close it down.
Yeah, and a couple other reflections from the game at Omagh. I mean, something that stood out to me was the black card to Hampsey was from minute 16 to 26, and then the second yellow card Hampsey, or the second card he got, was in the 39th minute. So you're talking about a half an hour towards the end and another 10 minutes earlier in the game, plus injury time, and you're looking at over 40 minutes where Tyrone were down a man. Now, Niall Scully, of course, got a black card too, so that's 10 minutes that Dublin were down a man. So that's going to be costly for them. Yeah, I've already mentioned the fact that Frank Burns put in the late hit on goalkeeper Evan Comerford, and that was a bit of a mistake from Comerford to sort of punch that ball directly to Con Fitzpatrick. So that was obviously not great for either team there, but it was very costly for Tyrone. I think Tyrone definitely wouldn't want to have played like that in front of their own home crowd to go down by 11 points to 2. Made a bit of a burst in the second half. But what stood out to me was that they were taking on these 40-yard shots an awful lot, which isn't sustainable really to win games against big teams. Richie Donnelly hit over 2 beauties, but himself and Conor McKenna had long-distance efforts. They weren't the only ones either, so I'm not just picking out those two. But I think that's something that the discipline is going to have to improve from Tyrone. Getting 4 red cards against Armagh was another thing, so this is a continuing thing. But for Dublin, if they can get a couple of more wins, all of a sudden they'll head into the championship forgetting about those 4 league defeats in a row and probably feeling good about themselves. And it's a pretty difficult end to the season for Tyrone. I think they've played Kerry and Mayo in their last 2 games. Like, I mean, there's nothing easy there, and you could be looking at getting relegated.
Well, there's a huge contrast here in terms of the remaining fixtures. Like, Dublin, okay, at the bottom of the table, but they've already played the top 3, who I think Kerry, Mayo and Armagh have been comfortably probably the best 3 sides in Division 1 so far. You know, everyone else has been kind of a bit up and down. But Mayo and Armagh have only lost 1 game apiece, and yeah, I think they and obviously Kerry are the table toppers and unbeaten. But like, yeah, so basically Dublin don't have to play any of them anymore. So then you're playing Donegal and Monaghan, your home advantage against Donegal, probably going to, you know, fancy your chances and probably get a good crowd. Maybe, you know, the whole St. Patrick's Day weekend and all that. You imagine people might go along for the Sunday afternoon to kind of watch them first time kind of in a Sunday setting this year. With Tyrone, it's just a lot of uncertainty. Look, I know they came back late, so there's an obvious difficulty there, but it's not like other seasons where you have more time to find your form. You got to find your form a bit quicker this year, because it's not like, you know, the old thing used to be, we get to the August Bank Holiday weekend, that's when the All-Ireland quarterfinals are in, so that's what we have to peak for. August Bank Holiday weekend this year, unless there's a replay, it's all over. Like, you know, it's there's not really to worry about for any side. So they have that issue. Look, there's different reasons for each player to kind of do it, like, but it is striking the volume of guys. Lee Brennan being the latest, like 6 guys who kind of chosen to depart. I think that just does create, it's a small little, you know, I think they're all individual cases, you know, but it is just interesting in terms of kind of keeping the whole group dynamic there. That's a bit of change in the dressing room and all that. And then obviously there's that kind of display issue, the marriage. So look, it was a pretty phenomenal achievement last year, kind of coming a little bit slightly left field in terms to win that All-Ireland, and they took their chance. And obviously for that group of players, it's the first one, you know, it's not like a couple of them had medals before or whatever. Like, you know, there is, and rightly so, look, there is unbelievable hysteria and there is unbelievable celebrations, and you got to enjoy it and savor it. And after everything guys have been through with COVID and all that, like, but it's just trying to turn around and come back, kind of back that up, is quite difficult. And they also, like, more than we've said in the last couple of weeks, Dublin have a mark on their back in terms of that they are a scalp. Like Tyrone are now a bigger scalp. Like, you know, you can frame it as Dublin, okay, we're going up to the home of the All-Ireland champions and we're going to take them down. I mean, can you imagine what it would have done for Kildare a couple of weeks ago, you know? And then there's the other element, like if they weren't to win next Saturday and then they are in relegation trouble, like could you imagine like the historical, and even with last year in mind, Kerry at home to Tyrone the last day, Kerry with the chance to send them down, you know? I was going down the Naughties road for a minute. You don't even have to dredge that up among supporters. That, you know, they're probably going to just, you only have to think back to last year. Like that could be some contest, you know.
Yeah, it could indeed. And the one thing that struck me about Dublin also, not just that some of these players are back, the likes of Merchant and, you know, Johnny Cooper's getting another game under his belt and so on. Michael Fitzsimons wasn't there at the very start of the year. James McCarthy is moving well. Like you just kind of, when he came on and he did his first burst where, you know, he gives and goes with the ball, and you were like, yeah, he's moving like James McCarthy of old here. So that's a big one. And obviously if they can get Con back as well, that's another huge one. But the fact that they weren't just doing these things that, you know, where they were gifting away the ball an awful lot in the first couple of games, like hitting kick passes 40 yards, knocking the ball out over the line, making silly errors.
Taking pot shots, you know.
Taking pot shots. When Tyrone were pressing to get back into this game and they started resorting to the pot shots, Dublin would run up to the other end of the field, do a nice bit of hard running straight up the middle, handle the ball around to each other, and someone had fisted over the bar. There was two like that in a row at one stage. No, I don't like fisted scores, but if you're talking about like being economical in front of the post, they were very smart that way. I did want to make one final kind of point with you on Division 1 and Kerry. Now, we were speaking with Andrew McLaughlin, former Kildare player, the other day, and I was asking about, you know, do Kerry have the steal this year? And obviously the win over Mayo by a point, and there was that late chance for Lee Keegan, but even so, Kerry found a way to win the game. And I was asking him about Kerry's steal and that, and here was his thoughts on that. And then I'm going to ask you a little bit more about it on the far side. Do they lack that steal, though? I mean, this is the thing that I keep coming back to. Last year in the semi-finals, I was like, I can't see Kerry winning this because they just don't have that steal, and I wonder, have they added it?
Yeah, I don't know. I suppose because you only know that when it's proven. You know, like I know Moran has that steal. You know, like I played against him and that. But it's the one thing I always mention about Kerry. It's funny because you bring it up there. Like people talk about the great Kerry team, and I can only talk about the one I played against. You know, people said, "Oh, geez, lovely footballing team." And I'm kind of going, yeah, but like it had like players like same as mine in centre back, it would eat you. You know, like Mark O'Shea gets away with being like the golden child because Tomas is a little bit worse and Dara's a little bit worse again, like, you know. But Mark was lethal, like, you know. That's, and I know everyone picks them out because they're a famous family, like. But in that line, you say like, well, Mark was lethal in terms of he was aggressive, he'd steal. Like Tomas was aggressive, he had steal. You had Dara and Scanlon in midfield who had steal about them going about the business. In the half forward line, you've got Paul Galvin who loved that, you know, as well as chipping on scoreboard or plays. He ate breaking ball and loved it when it got a bit physical. And then the full forward line, you had like Donaghy, like, you know, who could score and was lethal, but loved a bit of a row and some steal. And that took the heat off the likes of Cooper then to do what he had to do. Or Declan O'Sullivan, who was animal strong. Like he'd be hopping off and he'd be still running full tilt, sulling the ball. Like he was unbelievable. So they won them All Irelands and they were so good because they had such steel in each line. And I think you need that. And all the really, really good teams had that in players in every line, not just your supposedly hard men in the backs or midfield. Do they lack that?
Oh, nearly turned it on again there. So catch up on plenty of those exclusive interviews on patreon.com/OurGame. So after the game, Jack O'Connor said, this was a very different test to the games we played against the Donegals and the Monaghan's. This was very different. There was fierce pace in this game. And for the month of March, and Mayo gave us bagfuls there. It was great to be able to stand up to that. So what did this game say to you about Kerry overall? I mean, this Mayo play a frenetic brand of football, all action type of football compared with maybe the slower build-up of the likes of Donegal that he's mentioned there. So what did you learn about Mayo from this game? And also that point on the steal.
Well, just maybe to address the steal thing, first of all, I would agree with that. Like, and I think that was a good boost for them on Saturday night in terms of questioning. And because, you know, the result, there was no jeopardy about the results for long stages against Donegal. They had the game done once Clifford got the goal. Similarly against Monaghan, once they got those goals, there was no jeopardy. Dublin as well, like it was the first win where it really went down to the wire for them in this year's league. So it's the first win where they're really going to get asked those questions. as I said to you earlier, there was a collection of players in the stand that you reckon are probably, once they're all fit, are going to be coming back into the starting lineup. So to win in those circumstances, I think is really, really heartening for them. In terms of the steal element, but you're not leaving goals in, which is a kind of a big thing, which is absolutely cost them big time in last year's championship. And there's a couple of the personnel in the team. He actually wasn't there Saturday night, but I do like to look at Dan O'Donoghue, like, you know, in terms of kind of a bit of a block at cornerback. It looks to me like Adrian Spillane has been given the number 12 jersey, and that's it for the year, you know. Is in like, I'm looking at O'Connor and he's thinking like, okay, we have the Cliffords and we have Sean O'Shea. A bit like what Andrew was saying there, like, you know, there's all the silky skills and, like, you know, wonderful passing movements and great point kicking and all that, like, but here's a guy who's going to be selfless and work hard. And he was actually the one who gave the final hand pass for Tony Brosnan. And he does a lot of to quote that phrase, that kind of unseen work. Like, but even like the ferocity of Kerry's tackling around the middle in the first half. I mean, they got 2 points where literally it was Fergal Boland who got overturned by Darren Moyne at one stage. They broke very, very quickly, put the ball over the bar. Another time, it was Jordan Flynn got turned over by Paddy Clifford. Again, quick counter-attack, and the same story. They got a point off it. So I think that's going to come from that. But in terms of that frenetic thing you were talking about, I don't know, like, I know people were talking about the weather and some people seemed to think, looking at commentary, that it was a great game. I thought it was a brilliant contest in the second half. Like, Mayo were coming full throttle at it. Like, they looked pretty gutted afterwards that they were going away without a win, and like they really put it up to Kerry in terms of kind of getting those few points. So O'Donoghue's kick in was brilliant. Aidan O'Shea is kind of a lightning rod for criticism, and he gets a lot of flack. There's a lot of focus on it because of that late point, Stephen O'Brien. But I thought previous 20 minutes, you saw exactly what he has to offer the team. Still, it's basically around the middle. You know, it's not. I think his strengths aren't kind of that closer to goal. Like, to me, it's the stuff he was doing in terms of breaking kickouts, just kind of being that commanding figure. He was kind of attracting a couple of tacklers, and then he'd sit the ball at one stage to Hessian, who tears up and he offloads to Ruan. Probably just lack that little bit of scoring threat that goes back to the problem. The fact that Tommy Conroy's out for the season is just a real hammer blow. If you think Killian O'Connor comes back into it, maybe that would be a help. And obviously they didn't take the 2 goal chances in the first half, which it's just a long running issue. And I know it sounds like a simplistic thing to focus on goals, like, but every single All-Ireland final, there is this issue with the goal they concede or the fact that they don't take the chances themselves. But it does look to me like that's what Kerry are trying to do in terms of kind of have that kind of steeliness at the back. You know, it mightn't be pretty and it mightn't be rank up there with the kind of golden years football and the stylish way, but like, it's like, I think they feel they're very, very close to that All-Ireland. Like, Jack hasn't really ripped up the team, and if you look at it, the guys he has brought in, like O'Donoghue, Jack Savage, Craig Horan, these are all guys that have been kind of in on the fringes before. They're all in their mid-20s. They've all been playing for clubs or divisions who've got the latter stages of Kerry Championship over the last couple of years. They're kind of well conditioned. I think he's looking to just bring them in a couple of places and add that extra touch. But yeah, I think that steal thing is a great point. I think that's something that they're definitely targeting. And like the Morley, then you see what Morley does, that he's the +1 defender the whole time, the way he's getting back. And okay, they did get prized apart twice, but great save from Shane Murphy on one, and Aidan Norm was a very, very poor connection for the first one. But I think it's definitely a big emphasis. You can see that they're targeting at the moment.
Yeah, I was surprised that Diarmuid O'Connor didn't finish that chance. I think you need to be finishing chances like that, even though it was a brilliant save from Diarmuid O'Connor. Tony Brosnan 1-2. I thought it was interesting, if you watch back the clip, when he lost Lee Keegan initially, and Keegan ended up kind of on the ground on all fours, he just kept watching the play develop from all fours, and he was still down on the ground watching a couple of seconds later when Brosnan buried it into the net. So 1-2 for Brosnan, which was very good. Did you see enough from Fergal Boland? And like the quality of a couple of his points, especially the pinger from the outside of the boot in those conditions. Did you see enough to suggest he could maybe break in?
Well, he definitely impressed me on Saturday night, you know, but like he doesn't seem to have kind of featured not only in the team, but even in the match day panels over the last couple of years. Like, I know there was a bit of a mini issue. I think I'm right in saying this, that last year, like, he's a very good hurler, as you know, like with Turin, Mayo would have done with him for the Nicky Racker Cup. And he kind of wasn't available to them, even though he wasn't quite getting into the 26s, I think, at that time for Mayo. But he got turned over a couple of times, as I said, and one of them led to a point, but then kicked a couple of really, really good points, including one before half-time when they kind of really needed it. And for long stages, it was kind of working well. He's kind of very comfortable around the middle third. He plays deep anyway, so even though he's named at 13, it kind of worked well keeping him out and leaving Norman and Ryan O'Donoghue inside. Thought Jason Foley's pace, like, he just was kind of getting ahead of Orm on a couple of occasions, and that was kind of a big thing for them. And, you know, like a lot of it was just going to O'Donoghue. But it was interesting then. I thought, like, Foley and O'Donoghue would that have been a better fit for Kerry, because I think O'Donoghue, I know he didn't score from play, but I just thought he caused problems all throughout, and I just really, really impressed with him with the leadership. Like, like dirty wet night in Tralee, home fans baying for you, and like right in front of them, and he still manages to stick those pressure frees over towards the end. Like, I was asking one of the local Mayo lads, like, it was kind of interesting to wonder, like, when Killian O'Connor comes back, will he automatically go back on the frees? Because in fairness, O'Donoghue, I don't think has put a foot wrong really in that department.
A few games ago, I actually thought his form wasn't where it needed to be, and I was wondering, geez, what's going on with him here? But he was very good there the other night. And the other thing is, will Killian O'Connor be able to hit the ground running this season?
Yeah, well, he hasn't been seen on the 26, and he wasn't. It wasn't. I was even looking out for it. It wasn't even one of those that I could see, when 7 or 8 lads go running with the trainer at the end of a league game. The guys who haven't got game time, or guys who came on late, there was kind of no sign of him there. So they had kind of said he'd be back towards the end of the league. So I guess the next 2 days match squads will be kind of interesting now to try and look at, Yeah,
they certainly will. In Division 3, which we didn't look at all, Antrim, they beat Longford 119 to 12 points there. So that's comprehensive enough from Enda McGinley and his side. Westmeath saw off Limerick. Limerick had been top of it, but they're after dropping a couple of places. 6 points in that. Laois beat Wicklow 117 to 8 points. And Louth beat Fermanagh by 212 to 14 points. So just to give us sort of an idea of what the story is with the table there, Antrim are top along with Louth, then Westmeath and Limerick, they're just a point behind. So it's 7 points, 7 points, 6, 6, then 5 with Fermanagh and Laois. So it's an incredibly tight league, isn't it? And
like the stakes there are going to be absolutely massive with the Talton Cup thing in mind for this year, that whoever gets, could you see any of them making a provincial final? Probably not. Maybe Limerick, in fairness, on their side of the draw, they're going to be away from Kerry, so maybe might make a push. We'll probably have to get past Clare and Tip. Actually, they're playing Clare in the first round, so that will be quite difficult. But the point being that there's just a huge prize on offer for whoever can get it. But everyone's just been taking points off each other. The fact that there's times when you think one team's going to push Clare, but the fact that 6 sides still in contention, even Longford, I think, could they still theoretically? Yeah, probably could, yeah. So, but like this weekend will be, to quote that golf phrase, moving weekend, you'll have a good sense of it going into round 6, but around 7, but that'll be that'll be a big one to keep an eye on now for coming into the last day. Is there anyone you want to name as your goat of the week before we finish up there? Goat of the week off the top of the head. I don't know. We give the Clifford, given he kicked the winning point, or maybe Conor Sweeney, I suppose, given that was one of the biggest ones. In terms of kind of promotional lack going up to Cavan and all that. Let's give it on to him. And isn't it amazing that we didn't even mention David Clifford coming into this? I don't think he came up at all. Yeah. But hey, there you go. Okay, right, that's it from the show this week. Brought to you again by OurGameRetro.com. If you want to get any of these jerseys or any of the jerseys that you've seen us wear, go to OurGameRetro.com, use the promo code OurGame, and you get 15% off. Thank you very much, Fintan. We'll see you again on Thursday, the Patreon show, patreon.com/OurGame. Thank you very much. No worries, Shane.